My name is Elise. I'm 33 years old and work in a corporate job. I've been married to Luke for 2 years. He's 3 years older than me and works at a company similar to mine. Since we got married, we've been living with his parents in a 2-family home. Luke has one older brother, Cody, who's 6 years older than him. Before Luke and I got married, Cody and his wife, Chris, were living with their parents. Chris talks a lot and is very competitive, which often caused arguments with her mother-in-law. Eventually, Cody and his dad got tired of the fights and decided to move out. Luke had been living on his own before we got married, so neither of us thought about living with his parents. But then, his mom suddenly told us, "After you get married, you'll be living with us." Both my parents and Luke were shocked. I thought we'd stay in my apartment until we had kids, as it was more convenient for me to commute. We were both surprised, but we decided it would be easier to live at his parents' house since the commutes would be the same. Their house, built by Luke's grandfather, is old but has a main house and a guest house. We thought we would have enough privacy, so we agreed to move in. However, after moving in, I quickly regretted it. Luke's mom, who's in her 60s, started complaining about back pain and dizziness. She gave all the housework to me, including cleaning, laundry, and shopping. I work full-time, so even sharing chores with Luke didn't leave us enough time for our own lives, let alone his parents. On top of that, we had unexpected financial problems. The guest house needed major repairs. When we first saw it, it looked fine from the outside, but inside it was falling apart. We agreed to pay for the renovations since it was our space, but when my mother-in-law saw the finished guest house, she insisted that we fix up the main house too. She said, "You can't fix up the guest house and leave us living in a rundown house." We couldn't afford to fix everything at once, but she didn't care. She said, "Why is Elise working if she's not helping her in-laws?" She also wanted new expensive furniture and appliances, saying that the renovated rooms needed the best. On top of that, they made us pay for everything, even small things like green onions or toilet paper. Despite trying to save money by bringing our own food, my in-laws ordered takeout every day. Guess who paid for it? We did, using the family card that Luke was forced to get. This situation has made it hard for Luke and me to save any money. Every month, we stress out trying to balance the family budget right before the credit card bill is due. Luke and I had talked to my in-laws many times, telling them that we appreciated everything, but they needed to ease up. Luke even pointed out that they were making us pay for everything, from the renovations to daily expenses, utilities, and even property taxes. We were covering it all. His parents responded by saying, "Supporting your parents is natural," and scolded us harshly. This led to us both getting upset and crying, hoping it would make them listen. This situation had been going on for over 2 years. As we were about to enter our 3rd year living with them, things took a turn. My mother-in-law and Cody, Luke's brother, suddenly told us that we had to move out because they were moving in. Chris, Cody's wife, explained that Cody had been laid off. She said Cody had chosen to be laid off to help a colleague with kids, calling him kind-hearted. I was shocked. "How irresponsible can you be? You have twin babies yourself." I said, "How will you afford living if you move back home?" She mentioned that Cody had graduated from a top university, unlike Luke, and could easily find another job. So, I asked why he couldn't just find another place to live. She said he had no choice because he was living in company housing, which he had to leave by the end of the month. She also added that at least Chris wasn't a disappointing daughter-in-law like me for not having given them grandkids yet. Luke and I were frustrated and upset. We sat there for 2 hours while his parents argued with us on their comfy sofa. Finally, we had enough. "Fine, we'll move out this week," I said. Luke agreed, saying, "We've learned a lot from you, and now it's time to put that wisdom into practice." So, we made the decision to leave. 2 weeks later, we had movers scheduled and packed up everything. We planned the move during my in-laws' usual lunch at karaoke, so there wouldn't be any complaints about the things we were taking. We finished everything in 3 days, using our paid leave, and started our new life. Then, one day at work, I got a call from the front desk saying someone from my family was there to see me. I had a feeling my mother-in-law would show up soon, but I didn't expect her to come to see me instead of Luke. I quickly texted Luke, "She went to your place." "Huh? Sorry for the trouble," he replied. "No worries, but what should we do? I don't want to cause trouble at work." I suggested, "Just tell Maya to step out for a meeting. Do you think that'll work?" Luke responded, "Cody has 1-year-old twins himself. What's he going to do about expenses if he moves in?" I texted back, "Got it." I passed the message to the front desk, and my in-laws left as planned. That night, as Luke and I drove back to our in-laws' compound, we saw them, along with Cody and his wife, rush out of the main house and the guest house to greet us. Upon a closer look, I saw that both my mother-in-law and father-in-law had a baby strapped to their backs, probably Cody's twins. As I was locking the car, Cody shouted angrily, "Hey, how dare you show up here in my parents' cars?" Luke responded calmly, "Your parents' cars? Which ones?" This made Cody even angrier. "The cars you both drove up in," he yelled. I answered, "Well, Cody, both these cars were bought by us. Our names are even on the registration. Do you want to see?" Luke added, "Exactly. I've been annoyed by how our parents drive these cars like they own them. We let it slide because we were living together, but now there's no reason to let them borrow them." I also reminded him, "And don't forget that dad-in-law has that old minivan he used for work." At this point, Christ, who had been glaring at us, jumped in. "Who cares about that old car?" I responded, "But it's perfect for twins, isn't it? You can fit 2 car seats in the back." This back and forth made our in-laws uncomfortable, but then the topic shifted. Cody asked, "What about the furniture and the appliances? Taking those while we're away is stealing, not just from the main house, but from the guest house too." He and Christ both complained they couldn't live without those things. That's when Luke calmly said, "Why should we have to leave them?" I said, "Look, I get that we're using the guest house, but there's no reason to take stuff from the main house too." Things started to heat up when I asked, "Isn't that stuff something we all pitched in for?" Luke's dad shot back, "Once you give something, it's ours." Luke responded calmly, "Hold on, we never gave you anything, we just lent it to you. There's no paperwork saying it's yours." Both his parents were shocked by his response. Luke kept going, "We lived together, so we lent stuff as a courtesy. Now that we're living separately, why should we keep lending it to you? We're taking back what's ours. Is that a problem?" Luke and I smiled at each other, and everyone seemed to come to their senses. Then his parents asked, "But we have washing machines and fridges too. You don't need 2 of each." Luke answered, "Exactly, so why not lend them to us again?" I added, "Well, with all the stuff we've moved, it's getting cramped in our new place." Luke and I smiled, agreeing, "It's a tight fit right now." Christy started to speak, but we cut her off. "Remember, it's a storage room, so it's supposed to be cramped," I said. We both laughed, then added, "Until the official contract is done, this is how it has to be." Our in-laws were left confused. Then Luke dropped a bombshell, "By the way, we're moving to Boston next month." Luke explained that both of us had been offered jobs at the corporate headquarters, but we had turned them down because we were living with my in-laws. Now that we were moving out, we had both accepted the transfers and got internal notifications for new positions at the headquarters. If all goes well, we could work there until retirement. Then Luke added, "By the way, a colleague of mine is moving overseas for a while and wanted to sell his high-rise condo." Everything lined up perfectly. My in-laws were shocked. "Wait, you're going to live in a high-rise condo in Boston? How did that happen?" Luke smiled and said, "Life's funny, huh? If Cody and the gang hadn't told us to move out, we wouldn't have stumbled onto this." One of my in-laws asked, "How can you afford a high-rise condo? That seems impossible." Luke explained, "That's thanks to Elise's dad. He helped with the down payment. My sister is inheriting the family property, so this is kind of a trade-off. Plus, the condo's previous owner gave us a big discount because we agreed to store his modern altar while he's away." Luke added, "With that discount, it feels like we're the ones getting the better deal." At that moment, Christy, who had been standing nearby, burst into tears, saying, "That's so unfair. I'd rather live in a high-rise in Boston than in Atlanta." The in-laws, who had been quiet until now, suddenly started praising Luke, saying, "Looks like Luke really has it together, doesn't he? Like mother, like son." But Luke ignored them completely and turned to me. They said, "Living in a high-rise in Boston? Everyone's going to be jealous. When are you moving? We must visit." Luke smiled and said, "Why visit for just a short time? If we're going to Boston, you should come too." The in-laws agreed, "That's an interesting idea." But Cody and Christy were not happy. Cody snapped at them, "What are you talking about? Cody's being downsized, so you'll have to support us. Plus, until I find another job, Christy will have to go back to work, and you'll have to take care of the house and the twins." The tension grew, and Cody and Christy marched up to the in-laws, who were holding the twins. The babies started crying, and their cries woke up the entire neighborhood. The neighbors, who had heard the shouting and crying, were now watching from a distance. My in-laws looked embarrassed and turned red. They looked at Luke, waiting for him to say something. Luke smiled and said, "So this is a battle between a raccoon and a fox, huh?" Turning to the people around him, he explained, "If neither of our families works together, our finances will collapse next month." Christy, upset, asked what he meant. I added, "Christy, you thought that if Cody lost his job and moved back into his parents' house, you could just shift the utility bills and groceries onto them, right? Well, we've been paying for everything around here, and you can't rely on us anymore." Luke continued, "And starting next month, you'll need to help with the mortgage payments for the house renovation. The loan is in my father's name, not ours." Christy asked why it was in his father's name, and Luke explained, "I wanted the loan in my name since I was paying for it, but my dad insisted it would be shameful, so we used the house as collateral. We've been transferring money to his account to cover the loan, but now Cody needs to start helping." My in-laws and Cody didn't like that, but Luke stood firm. "We're giving up the inheritance, Cody, since you'll inherit the house. It's time to take care of your parents and the house." When my mother-in-law insisted that children should always take care of their parents, Luke replied, "Well, considering we've been covering your living expenses and the loan payments for the last 2 years, I think that pretty much balances out any future caregiving costs I'd have as a son." Luke turned to me and said, "Let's go home, love." I said, "Goodbye, everyone. I doubt we'll meet again. Take care." The next day, Luke and I sold the furniture and appliances we'd moved from the main house, along with 2 cars we wouldn't need anymore. When Christy texted asking if she could have the items, I simply replied, "Why?" and blocked her. After that, we used up all our remaining vacation days to finish moving into the new apartment. Buying the high-rise condo would take more time, so we decided to rent for the first year, thanks to my boss, who owned the place. One weekend, after all the stress, Luke and I were able to relax. As we looked at the city lights, Luke broke the silence. "I know I've been a hassle this time, but thanks for sticking with me." I teased him, asking, "What's with the formal tone all of a sudden?" But Luke continued, "When we first got married, I should have thought more about the idea of living together. Back then, I was just happy that you chose me over Cody, since we were always compared growing up. We'd been following our parents' wishes without really thinking, and when they told us to move out so they could bring Cody and his family in, I realized how they had been a burden on us for so long." Luke went on, "Then I thought about how much your parents must worry about you because of your situation, so I sent them an apology email. They said they'd forgive the past as long as we promised to make their daughter happy in the future. After that, they gave us the down payment for the condo without hesitation." Luke promised to do everything he could to protect our life together and our future, especially if we were blessed with children. Meanwhile, it seems like my in-laws are struggling. They're even using their retirement income to barely cover the home renovation loan. They can't afford to support 2 households anymore, and Cody's efforts to find a new job have failed. Christy had to go back to work early, and now the family relies on her salary and the money my in-laws earn from part-time jobs at a local senior center. Arguments have become frequent and loud, often overheard by the neighbors. A former colleague of mine texted, saying there's gossip that my in-laws might be planning to leave town. They've cut off all contact with Luke and me, and when they tried to reach out to us, my dad immediately changed his phone number. Considering how they'd always belittled my family and never bothered with any pre-marriage courtesies, changing the phone number was a small but important step. Now they have almost no way to contact us. What goes around, comes around.
Growing up as Victoria Hamilton's daughter wasn't easy. Every breath I took, every step I made, was carefully monitored and judged. My father, the CEO of Hamilton Industries, had my entire life planned out before I could even walk. "Charlotte, darling," he'd say, adjusting his perfectly pressed Armani suit, "a Hamilton never settles for second best." Our mansion in Beverly Hills stood as a testament to that philosophy. 28 rooms of carefully curated luxury, each one screaming wealth and power. But to me, it felt more like a golden cage than a home. By the time I turned 25, I had followed my father's blueprint perfectly. Harvard Business School graduate, junior executive at Hamilton Industries, and engaged to Bradley Winchester ILI. Heir to Winchester Technologies and my father's handpicked choice for my husband. There was just one small problem. I was desperately, hopelessly in love with someone else. I met James Mitchell on a rainy Tuesday morning when my Ferrari broke down on the way to work. He was the mechanic who came to my rescue, arriving in a beaten-up tow truck with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Looks like your timing belt's shot," he said, wiping his hands on his worn jeans. "I can fix it, but it'll take a few hours." Something about his honest brown eyes and the way he explained everything without talking down to me made me agree to wait at his small garage instead of calling in Uber. That decision changed my life forever. Over cups of terrible vending machine coffee, I discovered James wasn't just any mechanic. He'd worked his way through engineering school, graduating top of his class. He could have taken a cushy corporate job, but he loved working with his hands, solving problems, making things better. "Life's too short to spend it doing something just because it looks good on paper," he told me, his eyes twinkling. Those words hit me like a thunderbolt. For the first time, someone had put into words exactly what I'd been feeling all my life. One coffee led to another, then dinner, then stolen moments whenever I could escape my suffocating world. James never asked about my family's wealth, never tried to impress me with fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. Instead, he showed me the joy of simple things: midnight drives along the coast, picnics in hidden parks, and laughter. So much laughter. For 6 months, I lived a double life. Society princess by day, myself by night. But I knew it couldn't last forever. The breaking point came during a charity gala at our mansion. Bradley was droning on about merger strategies to anyone who would listen, while my mother paraded me around like a prize thoroughbred. "Charlotte will be taking over the East Coast operations after the wedding," she'd announced to yet another group of socialites. The Winchesters and Hamiltons. Imagine the possibilities. I felt like I was suffocating. Excusing myself, I fled to the garden, my trembling fingers already dialing James's number. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered into the phone, tears streaming down my face. "I can't marry Bradley. I can't be who they want me to be." James was silent for a moment before speaking. "Then don't be. Be who you are, Charlotte. That's the person I fell in love with." That night changed everything. The next morning, I walked into my father's study, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "Daddy, I need to tell you something." My voice shook slightly. "I can't marry Bradley. I'm in love with someone else." The explosion that followed was nuclear. My father's face turned purple as I explained about James, about wanting a different life than the one he planned. "A mechanic?" he roared, his fist slamming onto his mahogany desk. "My daughter, a Hamilton, in love with a grease monkey. He's an engineer, Daddy, and he's brilliant. If you just meet him." "Absolutely not." My father's voice could have shattered glass. "You will marry Bradley as planned, or you can forget about your trust fund, your position at the company, everything. Is that clear?" I stood up straighter, channeling strength I didn't know I had. "Crystal clear, Daddy. Goodbye." Walking out of that study was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My mother's hysterical tears, my father's threats, the whispers of the household staff. It all followed me as I packed a small bag and left the only home I'd ever known. James was waiting for me outside his modest apartment, worry etched on his face. When I told him what happened, he tried to talk me out of it. "Charlotte, that's your whole life you're giving up. Your family, your inheritance. I can't let you do that for me." I silenced him with a kiss. "I'm not giving up my life, James. I'm finally starting it." The next few months were a crash course in reality. I moved into James' one-bedroom apartment, got a job as an entry-level business consultant at a small firm, and learned how to live on a budget. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in my life, I felt free. My parents' attempts to bring me to my senses ranged from emotional manipulation to outright threats. They froze my accounts, canceled my credit cards, and even tried to get me fired from my new job. But with each obstacle, James and I grew stronger together. When we decided to get married, we planned a simple ceremony in a local park. No designer dress, no society photographers, just us and a few close friends. The morning of the wedding, I received a text from my mother. "Your father and I will be attending. One last chance to fix this mistake." My heart raced as I showed James the message. He squeezed my hand. "It's your call, love. Whatever you want." I wanted them there. Despite everything, they were still my parents. So when I walked down the makeshift aisle in my simple white dress from a department store, my eyes instantly found them standing at the back. My father looked like he'd swallowed something sour, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Neither moved to join the ceremony. During the reception, A casual barbecue in the park. They make their final play. Charlotte, darling, my mother's voice dripped with desperation. It's not too late. Bradley would still take you back. Think about what you're throwing away. My father cut straight to the point. This is your last chance, young lady. Stay with this person, and you'll never see a penny of your inheritance. Is that what you want? To live in poverty? I looked at James, who was chatting and laughing with our friends, completely at ease in his rented suit. Then I looked at my parents, trapped in their world of wealth and expectations. What I want, I said clearly, is to be happy. James makes me happy. If you can't understand that, then maybe we don't need your money, or you, in our lives. My father's face turned that dangerous shade of purple again. You're an daughter of mine, he spat, turning on his heel. My mother hesitated for a moment, then hurried after him. As they stormed away, James appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around my waist. You okay? I leaned into him, watching my past walk away. Never better. That was 6 months ago. We settled into our life together, working hard, loving harder. James continued at his garage while taking night classes for his master's degree. I threw myself into my consulting work, building my own client base. We were happy, truly happy, even if we had to watch our spending and clip coupons. But there was something James hadn't told me, something that was about to turn my world upside down again. Everything changed on a seemingly ordinary Friday evening. I came home from work early, excited to surprise James with takeout from our favorite Thai place. But our apartment was empty, with a hastily scribbled note on the counter. Working late at the garage. Love you. It wasn't unusual for James to work late, but something felt different. Lately he'd been distracted, taking mysterious phone calls and working odd hours. A knot formed in my stomach as my mind wandered to dark places. Was history repeating itself? Was I about to lose everything again? Unable to sit still, I decided to bring dinner to him at the garage. But when I pulled up, the place was dark. James's beaten-up truck wasn't in its usual spot. My hands trembled as I called his number. Straight to voicemail. Just as panic started to set in, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell, please come to 1875 Highland Avenue immediately. It's about your husband. My heart stopped. Highland Avenue was in the industrial district, miles from James's garage. With shaking fingers, I typed the address into my GPS and drove through the darkening city, imagining worst-case scenarios. The GPS led me to a massive modern building with sleek glass walls. Security gates opened automatically as I approached, and a uniformed guard directed me to an underground parking garage. Mrs. Mitchell, he nodded respectfully. Take the executive elevator to the top floor. Executive elevator? Top floor? What was going on? The elevator opened into a stunning office suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing at a glass desk with his back to me, was James, but not the James I knew. Gone were the worn jeans and oil-stained t-shirt. Instead, he wore an impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent. When he turned around, his familiar warm smile was tinged with nervousness. Charlie, he said softly, using his special nickname for me, I think it's time I told you everything. Before he could continue, the office door burst open. And there, like a scene from my worst nightmare, stood my father, mother, and Bradley Winchester Eli. What is the meaning of this? My father thundered, his face already turning that familiar shade of purple. Security said Charlotte was headed up here. What are you doing in the CEO's office, you mechanic? James straightened his tie and walked around the desk. Actually, Mr. Hamilton, I am the CEO. James Mitchell, founder and chief executive officer of Mitchell Innovations. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother grabbed a chair for support. Bradley's mouth hung open unattractively, and my father, for the first time in my life, was speechless. But my mother stammered, You're a mechanic. James smiled, taking my hand. I own a chain of auto repair shops, yes. It was my first business, started with a loan from my college professor. But Mitchell Innovations is my main focus. We're a tech company specializing in revolutionary electric vehicle batteries. That's what those late nights at the garage were about. We were finalizing our new prototype. My head was spinning. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know, James said softly, turning to face me. When we met, I just made the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Every woman I dated was only interested in my money, my status. But you fell in love with me when I was just a mechanic. You gave up everything for me. I had to be sure. Mitchell Innovations, my father muttered, his business mind finally catching up. The company that just revolutionized electric vehicle battery technology. The one every major car manufacturer is fighting to partner with. That's you. James nodded. Our market valuation hit $12 billion last week. Not quite Hamilton Industries territory, but we're getting there. I couldn't help but laugh at my father's expression. All those months of looking down on my poor husband, and James had been building an empire right under their noses. And now, James continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge, I'd like to discuss how you treated your daughter. The woman who, by the way, just became one of the largest shareholders in Mitchell Innovations when she married me. My father's face paled. Hamilton Industries had been trying to break into the electric vehicle market for years. Having a connection to Mitchell Innovations would have been a game changer. Now see here, my father blustered, trying to regain control. We were just looking out for Charlotte's best interests. By disarming her? James's voice was steel wrapped in silk. By trying to get her fired? By making her cry herself to sleep for weeks. Daddy, I finally found my voice. You always taught me that Hamiltons never settle for second best. Well, I didn't. I married the most brilliant, kind, and successful man I've ever known. And I did it without knowing about any of this. Charlotte, sweetheart, my mother stepped forward, arms outstretched. We were wrong. We see that now. Please come home. I looked around the magnificent office, then at James, my wonderful husband who had let me find my own way, support myself, grow stronger. I am home, Mom, but if you want to be part of our lives, you'll have to accept us on our terms. No more manipulation. No more control. My father looked like he was choking on something particularly unpleasant. And what about Hamilton Industries? James smiled. Well, sir, we've actually had several offers from your competitors for exclusive partnerships. But I thought, given the family connection, we might consider a different arrangement, if you're interested in discussing it, as equals. The next hour was surreal. My father and James talked business while my mother fussed over my terrible apartment and insisted we move into a proper home. Bradley had slunk away somewhere, probably to lick his wounds. Later that night, back in our small apartment, I finally asked James the question that had been burning in my mind. Why keep working at the garage? Why live like this when you have billions? James pulled me close. The garage keeps me grounded, reminds me where I started. And this apartment, these months with you, they've been the happiest of my life. We made it ours together, without any silver spoons or trust funds. Tears welled in my eyes. I love you, you sneaky billionaire. He laughed. I love you too, you runaway Harris. Life changed after that night, but not in the ways people might expect. We did move, but into a modest house we chose together. I joined Mitchell Innovations as head of their charitable foundation, using our resources to help other young entrepreneurs. James still spends time at his original garage, teaching mechanical skills to underprivileged youth. My parents, well, they're trying. Mom still makes not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren needing trust funds, but Dad has developed a genuine respect for James. Their weekly business meetings often turn into lengthy discussions about everything from classic cars to philosophy. As for me, I finally understood what James meant about life being too short to live it on paper. Sometimes the best things come disguised as broken down Ferraris and coffee from vending machines. But the best part? Every now and then, when we drive past our old apartment or grab Thai food from our favorite takeout place, James still looks at me the same way he did when he was just a mechanic and I was just a rebel Harris. Because in the end, love doesn't care about bank accounts or business empires. It cares about who you are when everything else is stripped away. And we're simply Charlotte and James, a mechanic and a runaway Harris who found something better than billions. We found each other. Hi, I'm Jessica Chen, and this is the story of how my husband's wealthy family learned that money isn't everything, especially when you underestimate the wrong person. I met Marcus at a small coffee shop where I worked while pursuing my computer engineering degree. He was different from the usual suited executives who barely looked at me while ordering their expensive lattes. Despite coming from one of the city's wealthiest families, Marcus would sit at the counter and actually talk to me about technology, coding, and my dreams of starting my own software company. "You're different," he said one day, watching me debug code on my laptop during my break. "Most people here just see me as the heir to Wong Enterprises. You see me as just Marcus." I smiled, closing my laptop. "That's because money doesn't impress me. Ideas do, dreams do." A romance blossomed naturally, hidden from his family's judgmental eyes. Marcus knew they wouldn't approve. They had a list of suitable heiresses for him to choose from. But love doesn't follow present paths. When Marcus finally told his parents about us, the explosion was nuclear. A coffee shop girl with a community college degree, his mother, Eleanor Wong, practically spat the words during our first dinner together. She sat at the head of their massive dining table, wearing jewelry that probably cost more than my entire education. "Actually, I'm completing my computer engineering degree," I corrected her politely. "And it's a state university, not a community college." "Same difference," she dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. "Marcus needs someone who understands our world, our social obligations, not some scholarship case." Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. "Mother Jessica is brilliant. She's developing innovative software that could revolutionize." "Enough." Harold Wong, Marcus's father, slammed his hand on the table. "No son of mine will marry beneath his station. End this foolishness now." But Marcus didn't end it. Instead, he proposed the next day, and we had a small private ceremony at City Hall. His parents refused to attend. "You'll regret this," Eleanor warned him. "She'll show her true colors soon enough." Despite his family's disapproval, we were happy. Marcus supported my studies while I finished my degree, and I started developing my software on the side. We lived in a modest apartment, avoiding his family's social circles and focusing on building our life together. Then I got pregnant. The news should have been joyous. Instead, it set off a chain of events that would change everything. "A baby changes things," Eleanor announced, suddenly appearing at our door one day when Marcus was at work. Perhaps we were hasty in our judgment. She invited us to move into the family mansion. Marcus was thrilled, seeing it as a chance to reconcile with his family. I was hesitant, but I wanted our child to know their grandparents. So we moved in. That's when the real nightmare began. Eleanor's acceptance was a carefully crafted trap. She began hosting elaborate parties, parading me in front of their social circle like a circus act. "Isn't it charming?" she'd say. "Our Marcus, so charitable, giving a chance to someone from her background." I endured it all for Marcus's sake, but then I overheard a conversation that chilled me to my core. "The girl is becoming a problem," Eleanor told Harold in his study. "She's actually trying to patent some software she's developed. Imagine the embarrassment if Marcus's wife starts peddling computer programs like a street vendor." "The prenup will protect Marcus's interests," Harold assured her. "And once the baby is born—" "Yes," Eleanor's voice turned cold. "Once we have our grandchild, we can deal with the gold digger appropriately." I rushed back to our room, heart pounding. The next day, I discovered they'd been working behind the scenes. My patent application had been mysteriously delayed. My university records showed an investigation into academic irregularities. They were systematically destroying my credibility. When I confronted Marcus, his response shattered my world. "You're being paranoid, Jessica," he sighed, not looking up from his phone. "Pregnancy hormones are making you irrational. Mother is trying her best to welcome you into our world. Your mother is trying to destroy me," I shouted, showing him the patent interference documents I'd uncovered. "Those are just standard legal procedures," he dismissed. "Maybe if you'd stop trying to prove yourself and just accept your place in this family." "My place?" I whispered, finally seeing him clearly. "You mean beneath you? Like your mother always said." Before he could respond, Eleanor burst into the room, waving her tablet. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "Arguing with my son in his own home. Causing him stress with your wild accusations?" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Eleanor clutched her chest dramatically, stumbling. "My heart? The stress. She's trying to kill me." Marcus rushed to his mother while Harold appeared from nowhere, pointing at me with rage. "Get out. Get out of this house now." "Marcus," I pleaded, but he wouldn't even look at me, too busy attending to his mother's theatrical performance. Security guards appeared, escorting me out with just my purse and the clothes on my back. As the massive doors slammed behind me, I heard Eleanor's miraculous recovery, her voice carrying clearly. Finally. Now we can protect our grandchild from that gold digger's influence. I stood there, 5 months pregnant, watching the sun set behind the mansion I foolishly thought could become my home. But I wasn't broken. I was angry. What they didn't know was that I'd seen this coming. I'd been preparing, and I had an ace up my sleeve, one that would make them regret ever underestimating the coffee shop girl. As I walked away from the mansion, my phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. Ms. Chen, this is David Zhang, Marcus's business partner. We need to talk. There's something you should know about Wong Enterprises and your software. Standing there, one hand on my belly where my baby grew, I smiled. They thought they'd won, but the game was just beginning. The next morning would bring revelations that would shake the Wong family to its core. That night, I met David Zhang at a small, discreet restaurant downtown. Unlike the Wong family's usual flashy establishments, this was a quiet place where serious conversations could happen without interruption. David was already waiting when I arrived, his usually immaculate suit slightly rumpled, suggesting he'd come straight from the office. He stood as I approached, pulling out a chair for me. Thank you for meeting me, Jessica, he said, his expression grave. I've been wanting to talk to you for months, but the Wongs, they have eyes everywhere. I sat down carefully, one hand protectively on my baby bump. What's this about, Mr. Zhang? And why now? He pulled out a tablet, sliding it across the table. Take a look at this. It might seem familiar. My heart stopped as I scrolled through the documents. On the screen was my software, the project I'd been working on for years. But it wasn't just my code. It had been modified, expanded, and was now being prepared for launch as Wong Enterprises' newest product. They stole my work, I whispered, anger building in my chest. David nodded grimly. Not just stole it. They've built their entire new digital division around your framework. That standard legal procedure blocking your patent? It was so they could file their own patent first. But how did they? I stopped, realization dawning. Marcus. He had access to my laptop, my files. Marcus is just a puppet. David leaned forward, lowering his voice. Eleanor and Harold have been running the company into the ground with outdated strategies. They needed a win. Your software was their salvation. But they couldn't bear the thought of owing their success to the coffee shop girl. I remembered all the times Marcus had asked about my project, showing sudden interest in the technical details. How Eleanor had insisted I use the superior computer in their home office. They'd been gathering my work piece by piece. Why are you telling me this? I asked David. You're their business partner. He smiled grimly. Partner? More like their latest target. I built the Asian market division from nothing. Now that it's profitable, they're trying to push me out too. Just like they did to you. He pulled out another document, a contract. But I've got something they don't know about. 20 years ago, Harold's father gave me special voting shares. In writing. If combined with other shareholders, these shares could force a board review. My mind raced with possibilities. And what do you want from me? Justice, he said simply. Your software is revolutionary, Jessica. But they're implementing it wrong. Their shortcuts will make it vulnerable. When it fails, and it will fail, thousands of businesses will be compromised. I sat back, processing this information. So you want to stop them? I want to help you take back what's yours, he corrected. And in the process, maybe we can save Wong Enterprises from itself. Over the next few hours, David laid out everything. The Wong family's perfect image was a facade. Their fortune was built on taking credit for others' innovations. My software wasn't the first thing they'd stolen, just the most recent. There's more, David said, pulling out one final document. Remember that prenup they made you sign? The one Marcus said was just a formality? I nodded, my throat tight. It has a clause about intellectual property. Any IP developed during the marriage belongs to both parties equally. When they stole your software, they actually gave you a legal claim to half of its value. I laughed bitterly. They'll have the best lawyers in the country. Yes, David smiled. But we have something better. We have proof. And he paused dramatically. We have your backup files. My head snapped up. What? That day you came to my office 6 months ago to discuss cloud storage solutions. I noticed you uploaded something to a secure server. I've kept it safe, untouched. Original timestamps intact. Tears welled in my eyes as I remembered. I'd been so careful, so paranoid about backing up my work. That paranoia had just saved me. Here's what we're going to do, David continued, outlining a plan that would make Eleanor's head spin. But we need to move fast. They're announcing the software launch at the annual shareholders meeting next week. I placed both hands on my belly, feeling my baby kick as if in agreement. I'm ready. The next week was a blur of preparation. David's lawyers worked around the clock, preparing documents. Tech experts analyzed my original code against Wong Enterprises' stolen version, documenting every theft. But the real masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Wong. A timid voice called me 3 days before the shareholders' meeting. It was Amy, Eleanor's personal assistant. I have something you should see. She handed me a USB drive, hands shaking. I've worked for Mrs. Wong for 15 years. The things I've seen, the people she's destroyed. I can't do it anymore. Everything's on here. Every email, every hidden document, every secret meeting. I knew it must have cost her to do this. Thank you, Amy. She hesitated at the door. Make it count. The morning of the shareholders' meeting dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative black maternity dress, my hair pulled back professionally. David met me at his office. Ready? He asked, helping me out of the car. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. More than ready. As we walked into Wong Enterprises headquarters, employees stopped and stared. News of my dramatic exit from the Wong mansion had spread. No one expected to see me here. We rode the elevator to the top floor, where the boardroom was already filling with shareholders. Through the glass walls, I could see Eleanor holding court, Marcus at her side like an obedient schoolboy. The moment we walked in, silence fell. Security. Eleanor shrieked, half rising from her chair. Remove this woman immediately. I wouldn't do that, David's voice cut through the room. Not unless you want to explain to the shareholders why you're removing someone who owns half of today's big announcement. Harold's face turned purple. What nonsense is this? I stepped forward, my voice clear and steady. Before you launch my software as your own, perhaps we should discuss the original source code and the rather interesting emails planning its theft. Marcus went pale. Eleanor's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. But before they could speak, the screens around the room flickered to life. Side-by-side comparisons of my original code and their stolen version appeared. Emails detailing their plan to block my patent. Security footage of Marcus copying files from my laptop late at night. And finally Eleanor's own voice. Once we have the code, get rid of the girl. Marcus can find a suitable wife later. The software is what matters. The room erupted in chaos. But I wasn't done yet. As chaos erupted in the boardroom, Eleanor tried to regain control. These are obviously fabricated documents, she shouted over the murmuring shareholders. This woman is trying to extort our family. I smiled calmly, remembering all the times she dismissed me as just a coffee shop girl. Fabricated? I pressed a button on my tablet. Like these surveillance videos from your home office? The ones showing Marcus copying my files at your direction. The screens switched to crystal clear footage. Eleanor's face went from red to white as she watched herself instructing Marcus, pointing at my laptop. Or perhaps, I continued, these bank transfers, the ones showing payments to delay my patent application. Emmy kept very detailed records, Mrs. Wong. At the mention of her assistant's name, Eleanor's composure cracked completely. You treacherous little. Mother, stop. Marcus finally spoke up, but I cut him off. No, Marcus, you don't get to play peacemaker now. Not after what you did. I turned to address the shareholders directly. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to vote on launching a software platform that was stolen from its original creator, me. A platform that, due to rushed and improper implementation, has critical security flaws. David stepped forward, distributing documents to the board members. Our technical team has identified 17 major vulnerabilities in their current version. If launched, it would expose client data to significant risks. One of the older board members, a distinguished woman I recognize as Patricia Chen, no relation, stood up. Mr. Zhang, are you vouching for these claims? I am, David replied firmly, and I'm exercising my special voting rights to call for an immediate leadership review. Harold slammed his fist on the table. You have no such rights. Actually, he does. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Everyone turned to see an elderly man entering. Harold's father, Richard Wong, the company's founder. I had never met him, but David had reached out to him last week, sharing everything we'd uncovered. Richard had been living in semi-retirement, trusting his son to run the company ethically. Our evidence had brought him back. "Father," Harold stammered. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Richard cut him off. "I understand that you and Eleanor have betrayed everything this company stands for. Stealing from a pregnant woman, destroying careers to cover your tracks." He turned to me. "Mrs. Wong, on behalf of the company I built, I apologize." Eleanor wasn't finished. She played her last card. "Marcus, tell them she trapped you with that baby. Tell them." "Enough," Marcus shouted, surprising everyone. He walked over to stand beside me. "The baby is mine, and Jessica is my wife, and everything she's saying is true. His voice broke. I helped steal her work. I betrayed her trust, because I was too weak to stand up to you, Mother." The room fell silent. Patricia Chen stood again. "I move for an immediate vote on leadership change and project review." "Seconded," came multiple voices. What happened next was like watching a decades-old empire crumble in minutes. The vote was unanimous. Harold and Eleanor were removed from their positions pending a full investigation. Richard Wong was reinstated as interim CEO. "Mrs. Wong," Richard addressed me, "would you be willing to work with our technical team to properly implement your software? With full credit and compensation, of course." I placed a protective hand on my belly. "I have a counter-proposal." Over the next hour, I outlined my vision, a new division within Wong Enterprises focused on ethical innovation and developer support, a place where ideas would be nurtured, not stolen, where credit would be given where due. "And I want David Zhang as my co-director," I finished. "His integrity helped expose this situation. That's the kind of leadership this company needs." Richard smiled. "Done." As the meeting adjourned, Eleanor and Harold were escorted out, their access badges disabled. Marcus approached me hesitantly. "Jessica, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. You're right, I cut him off." "You don't. Not yet." I touched my belly again. "But this little one deserves to know their father. If you're willing to earn back trust, slowly we can discuss co-parenting arrangements." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and left quietly. 3 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. We named her Grace, a reminder that strength can come with mercy. Eleanor and Harold faced legal consequences for their actions, but avoided jail time in exchange for returning all stolen intellectual property to its rightful owners. Not just mine, but dozens of others they'd stolen from over the years. The software platform, properly implemented, became Wong Enterprises' most successful launch ever. Our ethical innovation division attracted brilliant minds who might have otherwise been intimidated by corporate politics. Marcus and I eventually divorced, but he became a better man and a good father to Grace. Sometimes losing everything helps you find your true self. As for me, I run my division from the same office where Eleanor once plotted to destroy me. But unlike her, I keep my door open to anyone with a good idea, regardless of their background. Last week, a young barista came to pitch her software idea. As I listened to her passionate presentation, I smiled, remembering another coffee shop girl with big dreams. "Tell me more," I said, pulling out my laptop. "And let's talk about protecting your intellectual property rights first. Because success isn't just about winning. It's about changing the game for those who come after you."
Hi, I'm Emma Thompson, and this is the story of how an abandoned farm turned me from the family disappointment into someone my greedy relatives couldn't ignore. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the places others consider worthless. I still remember the day of the will reading like it was yesterday. The mahogany-paneled law office felt suffocating as our family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, adjusted his glasses and began reading my parents' final wishes. The tragic car accident that took both of them had left a $50 million fortune to be divided between my sister Sarah and me. Or so I thought. "To our beloved daughter Sarah," Mr. Harrison read, "we leave our investment portfolio, the family mansion, and all liquid assets. Sarah's perfectly lipsticked mouth curved into a triumphant smile. To Emma, he continued, his voice softening slightly, we leave Grandpa Thompson's old farm property in Montana. The room fell silent. Then Sarah's laughter shattered it. A farm, she sneered, her designer bracelet jingling as she waved dismissively. Oh, this is perfect. Little Emma always did prefer playing in the dirt to attending charity galas. I sat there, stunned. The 200-acre farm had been abandoned for 20 years, ever since Grandpa passed away. Dad had always called it worthless, refusing to even visit it. Now it was my only inheritance. There must be some mistake, my Aunt Patricia interjected, her face pinched with concern that wasn't for me. Richard and Margaret would never leave their daughter with just dirt. Mr. Harrison shook his head. The will is quite clear. The farm, including all structures and contents, belongs to Emma. Sarah stood up, smoothing her Channel dress. Well, sis, enjoy your barns and chickens. I've got a portfolio to manage. She paused at the door, her smile cruel. Don't worry, if you need a loan, I'm sure we can work something out. After all, what's family for? I left the law office that day with a single manila envelope containing the farm's deed and keys. 20 years of dust coated everything when I arrived at the property the next day. The main house was a weathered 2-story structure that had seen better days, but it was the massive old barn that caught my attention. Grandpa Thompson had been an odd man, brilliant but eccentric. He'd made his fortune in mining engineering before retiring to this farm, where he spent his last years tinkering in that barn. Dad always said the old man had lost his mind, wasting his genius on a worthless piece of land. The barn door groaned as I pushed it open. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the wooden walls, illuminating decades of cobwebs. Old farming equipment sat rusting in corners. But something felt off about the space. The dimensions didn't quite match the exterior. I remember following Grandpa here as a child, watching him disappear for hours behind a hidden door. Our little secret, he'd whisper, winking. After his death, no one could find that door. Dad searched briefly before declaring it another of his father's delusions. But I remembered. 3 taps on the north wall, then pushed the 4th board from the bottom. My hands trembled as I followed the long-forgotten pattern. Click. A section of wall swung inward, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. My phone's flashlight illuminated the way down to a massive underground room. What I saw inside made my heart stop. Covering the walls were detailed geological surveys, mining charts, and chemical analyses. In the center sat a sophisticated testing lab, preserved under dust covers. But it was the safe in the corner that changed everything. The combination was my birthday. Grandpa never forgot it, even in his final days. Inside, I found a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. The journal's first page read, "To Emma, the only one who ever bothered to listen." As I read through his meticulous notes, tears filled my eyes. Grandpa hadn't lost his mind. He'd made a discovery that would reshape the entire mining industry. The worthless farm sat on top of one of the largest rare earth element deposits in North America. He developed a revolutionary extraction process that was both efficient and environmentally friendly. The USB drive contained detailed patents, already filed, but never activated. Grandpa had been waiting for the right moment, and the right person, to bring his discovery to life. My hands shook as I realized what this meant. The farm wasn't worthless. It was worth billions. But I knew that if my family found out, they'd try to take it from me. Sarah would hire the best lawyers, claim I wasn't competent to handle such a discovery. I needed to move carefully, protect myself before anyone realized what Grandpa had left me. I spent that night in the old house, reading through every page of his journal. In the morning, I made 3 calls to a patent lawyer, a mining engineer, and an investment banker I'd befriended during my own quiet years working in finance, a career my family had dismissed as modest. "Keep this absolutely confidential," I told each of them. "I'm about to show you something that will change everything." Over the next 6 months, I worked in secret. While Sarah posted photos of her luxury vacations and charity galas, I assembled a team of the industry's best minds. The old barn became our command center, its hidden lab modernized with cutting-edge equipment. "These patents are revolutionary," Dr. Chen, our lead engineer, explained during one late-night session. "Your grandfather's extraction process could make rare earth mining both profitable and environmentally sustainable. Do you realize what this means?" I did. With the growing demand for rare earth elements in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles, we were sitting on a gold mine. Literally and figuratively. We'd incorporated Thompson's sustainable resources quietly through a series of shell companies. I used my savings from years of careful investing to fund initial operations. Every step was calculated to keep my family in the dark. Then came Sarah's wedding, a lavish affair at the family mansion. I almost didn't attend, but I knew my absence would raise questions. "Oh, Emma," Sarah exclaimed with false warmth when I arrived. "How's farming going?" Her new husband, a hedge fund manager, snickered. "It's quite educational," I replied mildly. "Actually, I've been meaning to ask, how's the tech sector of your portfolio performing?" Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "Why? Just curious. I heard rare earth element shortages are causing problems for manufacturers. Must be affecting stock prices." "I haven't checked recently," she admitted, clearly uncomfortable with her lack of knowledge. "You should look into it," I suggested, hiding my smile behind a champagne glass. The next morning, while Sarah jetted off to her honeymoon in the Maldives, we broke ground on our first extraction facility. By the time she returned 3 weeks later, Thompson's Sustainable Resources had already secured contracts with 3 major tech manufacturers. The story broke in the Wall Street Journal. Revolutionary mining company disrupts rare earth market. My phone exploded with calls from family members as our company's value soared past $1 billion in its first public trading day. "Emma," Sarah's voice was shrill when she finally reached me. "Why didn't you tell us? We're family." "Are we?" I asked quietly. I thought I was just the girl who got dirt for her inheritance. The next few weeks were chaos. Sarah and Aunt Patricia tried to claim that Grandpa's patents should have been part of the family estate. Their lawyers argued that I had concealed valuable assets. But Grandpa had planned everything perfectly. His will explicitly stated that all contents of the farm, including any intellectual property developed there, belonged to me. The hidden lab's existence proved he developed everything on the farm property. The final showdown came at an emergency family meeting called by Aunt Patricia. They all sat around the massive dining table in the mansion, the same table where they'd once mocked my modest career choices. "You have to understand," Sarah pleaded, her designer bracelets clinking nervously. "Dad would have wanted the family to share in this." I pulled out Grandpa's journal, opening to a marked page. "Dear Emma," I read aloud, "I'm leaving you this farm because you're the only one who saw its value beyond dollar signs. Your father and sister chased wealth, but you chased knowledge. That's why you'll succeed where they failed. The room fell silent. You know what the difference is between us, Sarah? I continued, closing the journal. When you got the family fortune, I congratulated you. When I built something of my own, you tried to take it. We can work something out, she began, but I cut her off. Actually, we can't, but I will give you some free advice. Invest in sustainable technology. Thompson Sustainable Resources is about to announce a major expansion. As I walked out of the mansion, Aunt Patricia called after me. Your parents would be ashamed of how selfish you're being. I turned back one last time. No, they'd be ashamed. They never saw what Grandpa saw in me. But that's their loss. Just like this company is your loss. Today, Thompson Sustainable Resources is valued at $12 billion. We're revolutionizing the mining industry while protecting the environment. The old farm has become a state-of-the-art research facility, though I kept the barn exactly as Grandpa left it, secret room and all. Sarah still tries to reconcile occasionally, usually when she needs something. Last month, she called about investing in our latest venture. I had my assistant direct her to our public investor relations line. The family mansion was recently put up for sale. Sarah's risky investments and lavish lifestyle had finally caught up with her. I bought it through a shell company and turned it into a science education center for underprivileged kids. Yesterday, I received an invitation to speak at my old high school's graduation ceremony. The topic? Finding value in unexpected places. I accepted immediately, already planning my speech. After all, sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what you're given, but what you discover when everyone else has stopped looking. As for the old farm, I still live in Grandpa's house, though I've renovated it thoughtfully. Every morning, I walk to the barn and tap that secret panel, remembering the man who saw past appearances to true value, both in the land and in me. They say success is the best revenge, but I've learned it's not about revenge at all. It's about proving that true worth isn't in what you inherit, but in what you create. And sometimes, the most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's the wisdom to see what others miss.
Out in the mountains, far from anyone, my mother-in-law glared at me. Take care now, she said coldly before slamming the door of her fancy SUV. The sound echoed in the quiet night as gravel flew from the spinning tires. She drove off quickly, leaving me alone. Under the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of her face. For the first time, I saw her cruel smile and the glint of her eyes, sharp and dangerous like a predator. She looked at me like she'd already won. Mom, why? I whispered, my voice shaking, but she just leaned out the window and laughed. It was a chilling sound, full of triumph. Goodbye, Emily, she sneered. No one's coming to help you. By tomorrow, you'll just be food for the wolves. Her words cut through me like ice. The roar of her SUV's engine faded as the headlights disappeared into the dark, leaving me frozen in disbelief. I reached for my phone, desperate to call for help, but it wouldn't turn on. Then I remembered, earlier, she had borrowed my charger. She had planned all this. She tricked me into coming out here under the pretense of showing me a stargazing spot. I felt so foolish. Maybe if I had tried harder to get along with her, or if I had been more serious about handling things with my husband, this wouldn't have happened. But now, standing in the freezing night, I was alone, with only the distant howls of animals echoing in the distance. Fear crept through me. I could feel something watching from the shadows between the trees. The crunch of leaves and heavy footsteps came closer. My heart pounded as I backed away, unsure which direction was safe. Behind me, the sound of footsteps grew louder. I'm Emily Matthews, 26 years old, married to John for 2 years. John has always been kind and supportive. When I was overwhelmed with work or unwell, he would cook for me or help me feel better. Marrying him was the best decision of my life. I come from a well-off family, but I worked hard to build a life of my own. I didn't want to rely on my parents' money, so I kept my family's wealth a secret from John. I wanted to live by my own efforts. John and I both worked in the bridal industry, and I loved my job, But then John decided to quit his stable job to start his own business. Though worried, I supported him because I believed in his determination. Then, I found out the truth. John had been in a relationship with another woman from his college days. Not only that, but he had racked up $50,000 in debt from extravagant trips with her. I had no idea and was devastated when I learned about it. To my horror, he started his business with that same woman as his partner. He claimed his family was supporting him financially. His mother, Susan, adored him and justified everything he did. She treated me as if I was trying to steal her son. Meanwhile, John's sister, Megan, lived off him completely. She refused to work, saying she didn't want to deal with things like speaking formally to her boss. She seemed entitled and difficult, which made dealing with her exhausting. For a while, I endured it all because I loved John, but Susan and Megan started visiting our home often, rummaging through my belongings without permission. They used my expensive, cherished items as props for their social media, treating them carelessly. One day, Susan took my favorite brown purse without asking and broke it. I hoped she'd apologize, but instead, she smirked and said, "It was bought with John's money, so I don't owe you anything." I felt crushed. Even though I earned a good income, I couldn't keep replacing my things endlessly. I reminded Susan that the bag she broke was something I bought before I got married. It was my first big purchase, something I had dreamed of owning. "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "Girls like you don't have money for things like that. Don't try to fool me." She had already labeled me as a gold digger, accusing me of spending John's money on luxuries. It was impossible to talk to her. She didn't even try to understand. She only saw me as an enemy. When I turned to John for support, he barely listened. "Just hold on a little longer. Mom's going through a rough time," he said. It hurt so much to feel ignored, even by him. I had always thought of myself as strong and independent, but being so alone was overwhelming. Around that time, John's business started to fail. He couldn't keep up with Susan and Megan's expensive lifestyles anymore. He finally told them he couldn't support them financially. They panicked, but instead of considering getting jobs, they came up with another plan. "Take some of Emily's money and give it to us. Family comes first," Susan declared. I explained, again, that I split living expenses with John and used my own income, but they didn't believe me. Their frustration grew, and for a while, they visited less often. I thought maybe they were starting to accept reality. I was wrong. They were plotting something far worse. When Susan found out about my wealthy family, her resentment deepened. She became obsessed, convinced that if I disappeared, they could control John's money and even inherit a fortune from me. She imagined millions, even though I hadn't written a will, and my family, not them, would inherit everything. Her twisted thinking led her to a horrifying plan. Susan knew I loved photography, especially taking pictures of the night sky. She researched remote locations with little human activity and found a spot where she thought no one would find me. "Out here, no one will ever find you. It's bear season, this'll look like an accident," she told Megan. Megan agreed without hesitation. "I'll drive for you, Mom. We're doing this for John," she said, pretending it was for his sake, though it was really all for their own benefit. On the day of the plan, Susan called me with an unusually friendly tone. "Emily, I know you love stargazing. There's a spot nearby with the most beautiful stars. Want to go?" she asked. Feeling hesitant but hopeful, I agreed. They seemed so kind that day, chatting about beauty and fashion, even complimenting my hair. "I've always wanted a daughter like you," Susan said warmly. It felt strange, but I wanted to believe they were finally accepting me. When we reached the spot, they encouraged me to step out and take pictures. "We'll grab some things from the car and join you," they said. I stepped out, looking up at the breathtaking stars, but then I heard the car door slam. I turned to see them locking the doors and starting the engine. "We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears, honey," Susan shouted as they sped off, leaving me alone in the cold, dark mountains. Fear gripped me as I realized I had been abandoned, but I wasn't entirely unprepared. I had a backup plan. Meanwhile, Susan and Megan were celebrating. "It's all taken care of," Susan said, grinning. They went out for a fancy dinner, thinking their troubles were over. But when they returned home, their celebration ended in shock. Police cars were waiting in the driveway. Standing beside them was me, calm and unharmed, alongside my father and several officers. "What? How are you here?" Susan stammered, frozen in disbelief. Megan tried to sneak away, but the police stopped her. I had been rescued thanks to my father's safety measures. Since I was young, he had insisted on tracking my location through GPS and having a backup emergency system. When I realized something was wrong, I activated it. My father, who had access to a private jet, reached me quickly. The clear stargazing spot made it easy for them to land and rescue me. I had also recorded the entire car ride, as my father had advised me to always record suspicious situations. "We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears." Susan's voice rang out clearly from my phone. The evidence was undeniable. Susan and Megan were arrested on the spot for attempted murder and fraud. Susan fainted, and Megan broke down in hysterics, blaming her mother. John, meanwhile, was exposed for being with his mistress all along. He testified against his family, but it was just another betrayal in a series of heartbreaks. The story became a media sensation. Headlines mocked Susan as the mother-in-law who wanted millions. Details about how Susan and Megan used my belongings for social media clout went viral. John, who had once prided himself on his reputation, now couldn't even leave the house without facing shame. As for Susan and Megan, their disgrace didn't end with their arrests. Someone leaked their phone numbers, and they were bombarded with calls from angry strangers. The next day, all of Susan and Megan's bank accounts were frozen, and everything they owned was seized. Without John's income, they couldn't afford anything. To make matters worse, news about John's mistress spread all over the internet, destroying his reputation completely. The man who had betrayed me had now lost everything, including his dignity. I found out John had been with his mistress since the beginning of our marriage. Remembering the kind things he once did for me now felt like a cruel joke. Why had he married me if he never truly loved me? My heart ached with pain and betrayal, but I resolved to move on. Susan and Megan were evicted from their luxurious apartment and moved into public housing. It didn't take long before their new location was leaked online. Susan became mentally unstable, constantly muttering about how her life was over. Megan, abandoned by her own family, tried to work part-time jobs, but struggled due to a lack of skills and work ethic. Megan even messaged me, asking for help getting a job like mine. "Working at weddings and wearing nice clothes sounds fun," she said. I ignored her. The bridal industry wasn't something she could just jump into, and their downfall wasn't my responsibility. Meanwhile, Susan moved into a rundown apartment surrounded by graffiti and decay. As for me, I left the house I'd once shared with John, along with all my possessions, and returned to my parents' home. It felt safer, even though I still carried emotional scars. One day, John unexpectedly called me. Seeing his name on the screen made my stomach churn. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I've cut ties with my mom. Please, let's try again," he said, but his promises felt hollow. How could I trust him again after everything? "Maybe your mistress needs your protection more than I do," I replied coldly, ending the call. Susan wasn't done yet. Desperate and bitter, she hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. When the detective found nothing, Susan latched onto a small detail, my PTSD. She thought she could use it against me. One evening, as I walked alone, Susan suddenly appeared on the sidewalk. Her clothes were shabby, but her face wore a twisted grin. "Guess the bears didn't get you," she sneered. Her words sent a wave of fear through me as memories of that night in the mountains flooded back. She even threatened to spread a video of me unless I paid her. Though her threat made no sense, her presence terrified me. She climbed into a car and drove away, leaving me shaken. I called my father, who was furious. Using his resources, he discovered evidence of tax evasion and fraud in John's business. When confronted, John had no choice but to admit his guilt. His mistress, Lena, was shocked to learn she was tied to his shady dealings. Their lies and schemes unraveled, leaving them exposed and humiliated. John's accounts were frozen, and he lost everything. Even his mother, Susan, abandoned him, saying, "You're no son of mine." Both of them were left with nothing, their selfishness leading to their complete downfall. Despite everything, I focused on healing and finding a new purpose. My experience inspired me to help others escape toxic families and rebuild their lives. With my parents' support, I opened a refuge center in the family retreat where I'd once been rescued. It became a safe haven for those who needed a fresh start. I even earned a counseling qualification to guide others through their pain. Over time, the refuge grew, welcoming people who needed a safe place to heal. One day, a woman arrived, escaping her abusive family. I reassured her, "You've done so well to get out. I'm glad I left when I did, too." Her tears turned to a soft smile as I reminded her it was okay to acknowledge the pain and set boundaries. With time, I began to smile again, finding joy in helping others rebuild their lives. Susan, Megan, and John continued to struggle, but I felt no pity. They were simply reaping the consequences of their own actions. Meanwhile, the refuge became a place of hope. ensuring no one else would have to face the kind of pain I once endured.
I grew up enchanted by the magic my grandmother created in her tiny kitchen. Each morning, the warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries would weave through our modest apartment, drawing neighbors like moths to a flame. Her hands, weathered yet masterful, could transform the simplest ingredients into creations that brought joy to everyone lucky enough to taste them. "Remember this, Emma," she'd often say, kneading dough with rhythmic precision. "Good food isn't just about taste. It's about creating memories." Her words stayed with me long after she passed away, leaving behind a well-loved recipe book filled with her handwritten notes and secrets. I was 16 at the time, but I knew then what I wanted my life to be. 10 years later, I had graduated from culinary school and spent countless hours honing my craft in various bakeries. Every paycheck went straight into my dream fund, inching me closer to opening my own bakery. The journey wasn't easy. Double shifts left my feet aching, my hands raw. But I never wavered. I had a vision. That's when I met James. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and he walked into the bakery where I worked, seeking refuge from the downpour. His damp suit and askew tie gave him a disheveled charm. But it was his smile that lit up the room. "Whatever smells so good, I'll take 2, he said, running a hand through his wet hair. I had just pulled my signature lavender honey croissants from the oven. "You're in luck," I said, placing one on a plate. "First one's on the house." He took a bite, his eyes widening in delight. "This is amazing. Please tell me you're not married." I laughed at his boldness. "Is that your way of asking me out?" "Only if it's working," he replied with a grin. It was. James was unlike anyone I ever met, kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my dreams. When I told him about my plans to open my own bakery, he didn't dismiss them as far-fetched like others had. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions and offered encouragement. Our relationship blossomed quickly. 6 months later, we were discussing marriage. That's when I met his family, and everything changed. Patricia Chen, James's mother, was the embodiment of old money and high society. Her perfectly styled hair, designer wardrobe, and air of superiority made me feel out of place from the start. As the property manager of Crystal Mall, one of the city's most prestigious shopping centers, she wielded her status like a weapon. So, she began during our first dinner together, sipping her wine. "You're a baker?" "Yes," I said eagerly, determined not to let her rattle me. "I've been saving to open my own bakery." She laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the room. "Oh, darling. Do you know how many small businesses fail in their first year, especially now? James, surely you can help her find something more realistic?" James squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, Emma is incredibly talented. She knows what she's doing." "Of course she does," Patricia replied, her smile dripping with condescension. "But wouldn't you rather have a wife who can attend charity galas and board meetings? Someone who fits our world?" Her words stung, but I didn't respond. James's father, Robert, quickly changed the subject. A tactic I later learned was his go-to for avoiding confrontation. Despite Patricia's disdain, James and I married 6 months later in a small ceremony. It was far from the grand affair Patricia had envisioned, and she made her disappointment known at every turn. At the same time, I was quietly working toward my bakery dream. A chance meeting with Marcus Sterling, a prominent real estate developer, changed everything. Impressed with my business plan and vision, Marcus offered to invest in my bakery, providing the capital to launch not just a small shop, but a high-end bakery and cafe concept with room to grow. What neither James nor Patricia knew was that Marcus owned Crystal Mall, where Patricia worked. When my application for a space crossed her desk, she dismissed it out of hand. "A bakery? Here," she scoffed. "This is a luxury mall, not some roadside stand." What she didn't know was that Marcus had already approved my tenancy. Her rejection was merely a formality. 2 weeks later, construction began on Sweet Heritage in the heart of Crystal Mall. Patricia's fury was palpable when she discovered her veto had been overruled, but there was nothing she could do. On the eve of the grand opening, she stopped by, her expression a mix of disdain and smugness. "When this fails, and it will fail, don't expect James to pick up the pieces," she said, her tone cold. I smiled, holding back the truth. "Thank you for your concern, Patricia. Care for a coffee? We're testing the machines." The next morning, Sweet Heritage opened its doors to a crowd of eager customers. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air, and the elegant decor showcased the perfect blend of tradition and modernity. By noon, we had sold out, and glowing reviews from food critics began pouring in. Patricia's disapproval was no match for the bakery's success. But as she stormed off that morning, unaware of Marcus's involvement, I couldn't help but feel a small victory. This wasn't just about proving her wrong, it was about proving myself right. And as I stood in my dream space, my grandmother's worn recipe book tucked into my apron pocket, I knew this was only the beginning. The situation reached a boiling point at the mall's monthly tenant meeting. Patricia had scheduled it during our busiest morning hours, forcing me to choose between overseeing the breakfast rush or attending. Reluctantly, I sent Sarah to manage the shop and went to the meeting. As you can see from these charts, Patricia was saying as I slipped into a seat, foot traffic in the north wing has become problematic. Certain establishments, she paused, her eyes locking on me, air causing congestion that disrupts our more established tenants. The boutique owner next door spoke up immediately. Actually, since Sweet Heritage opened, our sales are up 30%. Their customers shop while they wait for their orders. A ripple of agreement ran through the room. Patricia's face tightened. Well, she tried again. There have been complaints about odors. You mean the smell of fresh bread? Someone interrupted with a chuckle. It's fantastic. My customers say it makes the whole mall feel cozier. And what about Patricia? Marcus's calm but firm voice cut her off. Sitting at the back, the mall's owner had been silently observing. I think we've heard enough. Sweet Heritage has exceeded expectations and boosted mall traffic. Perhaps we should focus on more pressing concerns. Patricia sat down abruptly, her lips pressed thin. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. I don't know how you fooled everyone, she hissed, but this won't last. You're not good enough for this mall, or for my son. Mom, James's voice startled her. He'd arrived to meet me for lunch. Patricia immediately softened. James, darling. I was just expressing concern about the stress Emma must be under, running a business like this. Surely you prefer her to have more time for family. The only stress I feel, I said evenly, comes from your constant interference. How dare you? Patricia snapped. I'm only thinking of my son's happiness. No, James interjected, his tone sharp. You're thinking of yourself. Emma has built something incredible. Why can't you just support her? Patricia's eyes glistened with well-timed tears. I see she's turned you against me. What kind of woman drives a wedge between a mother and her son? The kind who's transforming your entire mall, Marcus said, approaching Patricia, my office. Now. We watched them walk away. James shook his head. I'm so sorry, Emma. I didn't know she was being this awful. It's not your fault, I said, though a part of me wished he'd seen it sooner. Before I could say more, Sarah rushed up, breathless. Emma, the food critic's review is live. The review was everything we'd hoped for, glowing praise for our innovative recipes, warm atmosphere, and excellent service. By evening, our shop was busier than ever, with new customers and even a few well-known food bloggers. Patricia didn't show up at the mall for several days. Gossip hinted at lengthy meetings with Marcus. I kept quiet, waiting for the right moment. That moment came Sunday evening at a family dinner Patricia insisted on hosting. To discuss some changes, she said cryptically. The meal was tense. Patricia picked at her food while Robert made awkward small talk. Finally, she cleared her throat. There have been developments at work, she began. James frowned. What's going on? Mr. Sterling is making organizational changes, she said, her voice tight. He's bringing in a new property manager, someone with fresh perspectives. What? James exclaimed. But you've managed Crystal Mall for years. Apparently, Patricia said bitterly, someone has convinced him otherwise. Someone, saw potential for something better, I said softly. All eyes turned to me. What do you mean? Robert asked. I took a steadying breath. Before I opened Sweet Heritage, I met Marcus at a seminar. He saw potential in my ideas, not just for a bakery, but for modernizing retail spaces. Patricia let out a sharp laugh. You? A baker with grand ideas? Yes, I said, sliding a folder across the table. These are proposals I've worked on with Marcus for over a year. Ideas for transforming Crystal Mall into a modern destination. James opened the folder, his eyes widening. Community spaces, seasonal festivals. Emma, this is amazing. Ridiculous, Patricia scoffed. Marcus would never. I already have, Marcus said, stepping into the room. Patricia's face drained of color. Mr. Sterling. I didn't. Emma owns 51% of Sterling Retail Properties Mall division, including Crystal Mall, Marcus announced. The room erupted. Patricia looked stunned. Robert choked on his wine. It's impossible. Patricia sputtered. Emma has raised mall revenues by 40% in 1 year, Marcus said. Her strategies are reshaping retail. Patricia whispered. Are you taking my job? No, I said firmly. You're being promoted. Regional Operations Director for our expansion. Assuming, I added, you can work professionally with me. Patricia's shock slowly gave way to grudging acceptance. I may have misjudged you. You definitely did, I replied. The question is, what will you do now? As we left, James squeezed my hand. I should have stood up for you sooner. Yes, I said, smiling. But what matters is what comes next. As we drove home, a quiet reflection settled over me. Patricia had been humbled, but questions lingered in my mind. Could her newfound acceptance of me endure beyond the reach of circumstance? Would it mean more or less, because it had been spurred by necessity rather than genuine change? The next day heralded fresh challenges. News of the management shifts swept through the mall, transforming my daily interactions. Some employees greeted me with respect, others with nervous glances that hinted at their fears about the future. Yet beneath the surface, there was a growing energy, the buzz of something new and promising taking shape. Patricia, meanwhile, had taken a week to process the upheaval. When she returned, it was with a surprising fervor for the new initiatives, though her motivation seemed more about proving herself to Marcus than embracing the vision. Still, it was progress. 3 weeks later, she appeared at Sweet Heritage before dawn. Her usually immaculate posture was softened by uncertainty, and her designer handbag seemed more like a shield than an accessory. We need to talk, she said simply. I was wrist-deep in croissant dough but gestured toward my office. 5 minutes. She waited silently, observing as I finished the delicate laminating process. By the time we sat across from each other, the tension had thickened. Her eyes wandered over the shelves in my office, pausing on my grandmother's recipe book. I've been reviewing the expansion plans, she began, her tone uncharacteristically measured. The demographic data for the suburban locations is impressive. I nodded. Thank you. I stayed silent, waiting for her to say what she had really come to say. Her fingers worried at the pearls around her neck. Finally, she spoke, her voice wavering. I owe you an apology. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear her out. When James introduced you to us, I was prejudiced. I saw someone I believed didn't belong. Someone I thought would hold my son back. I couldn't have been more wrong. Her candor caught me off guard, but I simply asked, and now? Now, I see someone with vision and character, someone who took every opportunity to retaliate against me and chose grace instead. You've built something extraordinary, and I misjudged you completely. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And what changed your mind? You did, she said softly. Your actions, your resilience. And this place, it's more than a bakery, isn't it? It's a living, breathing example of what retail can become. That's the idea, I replied. Retail isn't just about transactions anymore. It's about creating connections and experiences, about telling stories. Her gaze drifted to the recipe book again. The morning buns, she said, almost to herself. Yes. They remind me of the ones my grandmother used to make. I lost her recipe years ago. I stood and retrieved the book from the shelf. Would you like to see how they're made? Her eyes widened, tears gathering at the corners. You'd share that with me. Family recipes are meant to be shared, I said. If we're going to make this work, we need to start there. That morning, Patricia Chen donned an apron in the Sweet Heritage kitchen for the first time. Her initial attempts at morning buns were far from perfect, uneven filling, lopsided shapes. But when she bit into her first creation, her smile was unguarded and genuine. Over the weeks that followed, Patricia's early morning baking sessions became a regular sight. The tenants, initially shocked, began to embrace the idea. Our professional relationship grew, and so slowly did our personal one. Months later, at the grand opening of Sweet Heritage's second location, Patricia was teaching her friends from the country club how to make croissants. Marcus, watching the scene, nudged me with a grin. Never thought I'd see the day. Neither did I replied honestly. The expansion flourished, with 5 new locations opening within a year. Each one reflected the heart of the original sweet heritage while embracing Patricia's operational expertise. The morning buns, now a signature item, became the subject of endless speculation among food bloggers. One evening, as we closed the flagship store, Patricia lingered. "Emma, I've been thinking about your community initiative," she said. "Oh, what if we expanded it? Cooking classes, maybe, teaching people how to create their own family traditions." I smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea." Her hug was unexpected but warm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." As I drove home, I reflected on how life's sweetest triumphs often lie in the connections we forge. Success wasn't just about building a thriving business or proving others wrong. It was about honoring my grandmother's legacy and helping others, even those who resisted, grow. The next morning, Patricia was already at Sweet Heritage when I arrived. "I was thinking," she said, her apron dusted with flour. "Maybe we could create a special pastry for James and your anniversary, something that tells your story." "Our story," I corrected gently, "the bitter and the sweet." She smiled, understanding. "Yes, all of it." As we worked side by side in the warm glow of the rising sun, the scent of fresh possibilities filled the air. It wasn't just a new beginning for the bakery or the mall. It was a new beginning for us all.
Hi, I'm Maya Chin, and this is the story of how my small family restaurant became one of the most exclusive dining spots in New York City, all because my in-laws couldn't resist tearing me down one last time. Cooking has always been my passion. Growing up in a modest Chinese-American household, I spent countless hours in our tiny kitchen, learning traditional recipes from my grandmother while adding my own contemporary twists. My parents wanted me to pursue a respectable career in medicine or law, but my heart belonged to the culinary arts. That's how I met James, my husband. He was a regular at the small Asian fusion restaurant where I worked as a sous chef. He'd come in 3 times a week, always ordering something different, always asking to compliment the chef. When we finally met, the connection was instant. He loved my innovative takes on traditional dishes, and I loved his genuine appreciation for culinary creativity. What I didn't love was his family. The Whittakers were old money, with a lineage that apparently traced back to the Mayflower, something his mother, Elizabeth, mentioned at every possible opportunity. His father, Richard, was a real estate mogul who owned half the commercial properties in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And his sister, Victoria, was a social media influencer who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow had 3 million followers on Instagram. From the moment James introduced me, they made it clear I wasn't their kind of people. "A chef?" Elizabeth had said, her voice dripping with disdain. "How quaint." But James stood by me, and we got married despite their objections. I thought time would heal the rift, that proving myself as a loving wife would eventually win them over. I was wrong. 5 years into our marriage, I decided to pursue my dream. With our savings and a small inheritance from my grandmother, I opened Fusion Garden, a cozy restaurant that blended traditional Asian cuisine with modern American influences. James supported me completely, even though it meant living on a tighter budget while the restaurant found its footing. The first year was tough, as it is for any new restaurant. We had good days and bad days, but slowly, we were building a loyal customer base. Food critics were starting to take notice, and our weekend reservations were usually booked solid. It wasn't a Michelin star establishment, but it was mine, and I was proud of what we were creating. Then came last year's Thanksgiving. The Whittakers insisted on hosting the entire extended family, including me and James. Usually, I tried to avoid these gatherings, but James convinced me it would be good for business networking. Dad's friends are always looking for new places to host their business dinners, he said optimistically. I should have trusted my instincts. The evening started with the usual subtle jabs. Elizabeth commented on my simple dress, which cost 3 months of profits. Victoria asking if I needed recommendations for a good plastic surgeon. She knew a great one who fixed her nose. And Richard barely acknowledging my existence. But it was during dinner that everything fell apart. So Maya, Elizabeth started, swirling her wine glass with practiced elegance. James tells me you're little. The restaurant is still operating. How surprising. I felt James tense beside me. Yes, we're doing quite well, actually. Our weekend reservations are usually. Oh, darling. Victoria cut in, scrolling through her phone. I saw your reviews online. 3 stars? That's barely passing, isn't it? Actually, 3 stars on Michelin is. I tried to explain, but Richard interrupted. Let's be honest here, he said, putting down his fork with a loud clunk that silenced the table. We've all eaten there. The food is mediocre at best. No innovation, no style, just worthless food from a worthless chef who clearly doesn't understand fine dining. The table fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, some with pity, others with poorly concealed amusement. Dad, James started, but I placed my hand on his arm. No, Richard's entitled to his opinion, I said quietly, standing up. Though I find it interesting that someone who thinks my food is worthless has reserved a table at Fusion Garden 6 times in the past month under different names. Elizabeth's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. What's wrong, Elizabeth? Didn't think I'd recognize your husband when he came in wearing different suits, sitting at corner tables, taking detailed notes? Or did you think I wouldn't notice Victoria's anonymous food blogger friends coming in with their cameras? Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of red. We were merely conducting market research. The property your restaurant sits on is owned by the Chang Family Trust. I finished for him. My grandmother's family. Not part of your real estate empire, and not for sale. The silence that followed was deafening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I continued, placing my napkin on the table, I have a restaurant to run. A worthless one, apparently, but it's mine. I walked out of that dining room with my head held high, ignoring Elizabeth's spluttering and Victoria's furious typing on her phone. James followed me to the car, apologizing profusely, but I barely heard him. Because during those painful minutes at the Whitaker family table, a plan had started forming in my mind. A plan that would take 6 months to execute, would cost me every favor I'd ever earned in the culinary world, and would ultimately change everything. They thought my food was worthless. Fine. They wanted to conduct market research. Perfect. They didn't think I understood fine dining. Oh, they had no idea what I was capable of. That night, as James slept, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my old mentor from culinary school, now a celebrated chef in Paris. The second was to a restaurant designer who owed me a favor. And the third was to a certain celebrity chef known for transforming restaurants. By morning, Operation Restaurant Revolution was in motion. The next 6 months would test everything I knew about cooking, business, and revenge. And the best part, the Whitakers would never see it coming. The next morning, I arrived at Fusion Garden earlier than usual. My staff could sense something had changed. There was a new energy in my movements, a spark in my eyes that hadn't been there before. They'd learn why soon enough. Team meeting in 10 minutes, I announced, tying my apron with practiced precision. Everyone needs to be there. And I mean everyone. As my staff gathered in the dining room, servers, line cooks, dishwashers, hosts, I took a deep breath and shared my vision. Over the next 6 months, we would transform Fusion Garden into something unprecedented in New York's culinary scene. But I needed their complete dedication and discretion. What I'm proposing will be the hardest work you've ever done, I told them frankly. Double shifts, late nights, endless practice. Some of you might want to leave, and I'll write glowing recommendations if you do. But if you stay, I smiled, you'll be part of culinary history. To my amazement, not a single person left. They'd seen how I treated my staff. Like family, better than my actual in-laws had ever treated me. They trusted me, and that trust was about to pay off. The next few months were a blur of activity, all conducted under absolute secrecy. The restaurant designer I'd called, Marcus, worked after hours, transforming our cozy dining room into something spectacular. We replaced every table, chair, and light fixture. The walls were redone in hand-painted murals depicting the fusion of Eastern and Western culinary traditions. The kitchen was completely reorganized and equipped with state-of-the-art equipment. My old mentor, Chef Jacques, flew in from Paris twice a month to help refine our techniques and train my staff. Together, we revolutionized every recipe on the menu, elevating each dish while maintaining the soul of the original concept. We weren't just making food, we were creating edible art. But the real game changer was my third call from that night, to Gordon Ramsay's team. I'd met Gordon briefly during my culinary school days, and he remembered my innovative dessert fusion that won a national competition. When I explained my situation and my vision, he was intrigued enough to get involved. The plan was simple but ambitious. Gordon would feature Fusion Garden in a special episode of his new streaming series about revolutionary restaurants. But first, we had to become revolutionary. For 6 months, we operated on 2 tracks. During regular hours, we maintained our usual service, though with gradually increasing prices and limited availability of reservations. Richard continued his undercover visits, taking notes and looking smug. Victoria's blogger friends kept coming in, posting lukewarm reviews about our decent but uninspired offerings. But after hours, we were building something extraordinary. My staff trained relentlessly. Every dish was deconstructed and rebuilt. Every service pattern was choreographed to perfection. We weren't just preparing food, we were creating an experience. James watched all this with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure about this?" he'd ask, seeing me return home exhausted at 3 a.m. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "This isn't about proving something," I'd reply. "This is about becoming something." Finally, after 6 months of preparation, we were ready. The restaurant closed for 2 weeks for renovations. Victoria immediately posted about how this was the beginning of the end for Fusion Garden. Richard was overheard at his country club betting on how long before we went bankrupt. Perfect. The night of our reopening, I made sure the Whittakers received a special invitation. Elizabeth's RSVP came back with a note about how they were so concerned about our struggles and would of course support family in difficult times. They arrived as a group: Richard, Elizabeth, Victoria, and several of their society friends. James met them at the door, playing his part perfectly. "Maya's in the kitchen," he said, sounding worried. "She's been acting strange lately." They sat at the best table, already smirking, ready to witness what they assumed would be my humiliation. Then the show began. The new fusion garden was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Each dish was a theatrical presentation of flavor and technique. Dim sum that levitated on magnetic plates. Soup served in hand-blown glass spheres that dissolved when touched. Traditional Chinese dishes deconstructed and rebuilt with molecular gastronomy techniques. And in the middle of service, right on cue, Gordon Ramsay walked into the kitchen. The dining room went silent as he emerged a few minutes later, sampling dishes, nodding approvingly. Camera crews captured everything, including the Whittakers' increasingly pale faces. This, Gordon announced to the cameras, is the future of fusion cuisine. Chef Maya has created something extraordinary here. Michelin should be calling any day now. Elizabeth's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Victoria's phone livestream suddenly went quiet. Richard's face had turned that interesting shade of red again. Then I emerged from the kitchen, no longer in chef's whites, but in a designer dress, followed by some of the most renowned food critics in New York. They'd all been there incognito, scattered throughout the dining room. "The property offers are no longer necessary, Richard," I said quietly, stopping at their table. "Fusion Garden isn't for sale. In fact, we're expanding. That empty building next door, the one you've been trying to buy for years. I closed on it this morning. We're opening a culinary school. You can't." Richard sputtered. "Oh, and Elizabeth?" I continued. "Those reservations you've been trying to make under different names. We're booked solid for the next year. But don't worry, I've saved a permanent table for my family." I smiled sweetly. "Right next to the kitchen, where you can smell everything, but taste like anything." The episode aired 3 months later. Fusion Garden became the hottest reservation in New York overnight. We earned our first Michelin star within 6 months, with rumors of a second on the way. The culinary school opened, focusing on fusion cuisine and innovative techniques. The Whittakers? They still come in sometimes, sitting at their assigned table by the kitchen, watching as I live my dream. Victoria's followers love her posts about her talented sister-in-law. Elizabeth brags at her social clubs about how she always saw my potential. Richard even offered to invest in my next venture. I declined, of course. Some things, like self-respect and true passion, are worth more than money or social status. My grandmother taught me that, along with her recipes that started this whole journey. James and I are expecting our first child now. Yesterday, I felt the baby kick while I was developing a new dessert menu. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "Remember this, little one. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right." The kitchen timer dings, and I have to go. There's a new fusion dish I'm working on, combining my grandmother's secret Chiao Long Bao recipe with a French soufflé technique. The critics will love it. But more importantly, I love it. And in the end, that's what makes anything truly worthless or priceless, not what others say about it, but what you know it's worth. As I head back to my kitchen, I pass the Whittakers' table. It's empty tonight, but the reservation sign is still there, a small reminder of how far I've come. Some might call it petty, keeping that table as a monument to their disdain. I call it seasoning, that extra pinch of satisfaction that makes success taste even sweeter.
The day I went to my future in-law's house for the first time to introduce myself as their future daughter-in-law, I was incredibly nervous. As soon as I stepped inside the entrance, I was greeted by my future sister-in-law, Melissa. At first, she was all smiles, saying, "Nice to meet you," with a sweet demeanor. However, the moment my future husband, Adam, left the room, her attitude shifted drastically. "You should just leave," she coldly spat, splashing water at me. I was so shocked by her behavior that I couldn't say a word. My future in-laws, who were right there, said nothing. All they managed was a week. Oh, well, let's not make a fuss. Feeling humiliated, I stood up to deal with my soaking wet clothes, completely lost. Just then, the front door opened, and Melissa's husband, Ken, arrived, slightly late. Hi, nice to meet you. I introduced myself weakly, pretending nothing had happened, but Ken looked surprised. Wait a minute. At that moment, Melissa's face turned pale, her demeanor shifted, and the entire atmosphere changed. My name is Lisa, and I'm 30 years old. Adam and I were introduced by mutual friends, and now we live a quiet life together. Though we haven't been blessed with children, I feel happy every day. My journey with Adam began several years ago. After graduating from vocational school, I worked in housekeeping services. I've always loved cooking and cleaning, and I'm proud to have helped so many families through my work. For example, I regularly assisted busy working couples by cleaning and preparing dinner, providing them with a relaxing home environment when they returned. For families with small children, I tidied their living spaces, giving overwhelmed parents a chance to breathe. And for elderly individuals living alone, I helped with daily shopping and meal preparation, ensuring they could maintain a safe and comfortable lifestyle. Through these experiences, I found deep fulfillment in improving the quality of life for others. One family I'll never forget was the Thompsons. One day, I received a call from the company I worked for about a new assignment, a large, luxurious home owned by a wealthy couple. When I arrived, I was struck by the spacious yard and grand gate. However, parts of the house seemed neglected. Hello, I'm Lisa. I'll be helping out from today, I greeted them. The husband, Mark Thompson, welcomed me warmly. I'm Mark, and this is my wife, Amy. Thank you for coming. This house is far too big for us to handle on our own, so we're grateful for your help. Amy, though looking a bit tired, gave me a kind smile. I began by touring the house, deciding where to start. From the large living room windows, I noticed the garden. Though it needed care, it was home to beautiful flowers Amy had nurtured. These flowers are lovely, I commented. Thank you, she replied softly. I've been taking care of them for years. I started cleaning, polishing windows, dusting furniture, and organizing their home. Mark and Amy often watched me work, occasionally chatting with me. You're so skilled for someone so young. How did you get into this line of work? Mark asked. I've always loved cooking and cleaning since I was a child, I explained. I wanted a career where I could help others. Mark nodded in approval, looking pleased. Over time, we grew closer. Between tasks, we would sit for tea and share stories. One day, Amy showed me their family photo album. What a lovely family. Is this your son? I asked. Yes, she said. He works for a big company and travels all over the world, so he doesn't come home often. Right now, I think he's in, well, I forget which country. Though they spoke proudly of their son's success, a hint of sadness lingered. It sounds like you're very proud of him. We are, Mark said, but we miss him a lot. When he comes home, it's the highlight of our year. Their longing for their son touched me deeply. I found myself wishing for his return, too. One day, Mark asked for a special favor. Lisa, could you help me with something? Today is Amy's birthday. Honored, I prepared a special meal for her 77th birthday, complete with her favorite Japanese dishes and a homemade cake. When I served it, Amy's eyes welled with tears. This is the most wonderful birthday I've had in years. Thank you so much, Lisa, she said, her words deeply moving me. But time is relentless. One day, when I arrived at the Thompson house, I noticed a black ribbon on the front door. A terrible sense of dread washed over me as Amy greeted me with red, tear-streaked eyes. I'm sorry I didn't contact you, Lisa, but Mark passed away yesterday, she said, her voice breaking. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Mark, who always greeted me with a warm smile, was gone. A painful tightness gripped my chest. From that day on, Amy's demeanor changed. She stopped tending to her beloved garden, and the once vibrant flowers began to wither. She would sit on the sofa, staring blankly, lost in grief. I tried everything to cheer her up, but the void in her heart remained. Even the meals I prepared would go untouched. Lisa, I think it's time for me to prepare for my own departure, she said one day, her voice heavy with sorrow. Hearing her words, I couldn't hold back my tears. Every day, I searched for ways to lift her spirits. I took her on walks around the neighborhood, and with her son's permission, I even arranged small day trips for Amy to help lift her spirits. Ever since she started visiting, my days have been so much brighter. she said one afternoon, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't feel as lonely anymore, thank you so much. Her words meant more to me than I could ever express. Just hearing her say thank you made everything worth it. However, only a few days after she shared those heartfelt words, Amy quietly passed away. For a while, I couldn't process the loss. The house, once filled with life and warmth, now felt vast and empty. Without Amy, it was as if all the color had drained away. I buried myself in work, using it as a way to numb the pain. My friends noticed the change in me, especially Emma, my close friend. Lisa, she said one day, gently but firmly, there's someone I really think you should meet. He's a great guy, just give it a try. After Amy's death, I hadn't been able to fill the hole in my heart. I went through the motions at work, but my passion was gone. Seeing me like this, Emma invited me to a dinner gathering. That night, for the first time in a long while, I dressed up a little and tried to push through my lingering sadness. When I walked into the restaurant, I saw Emma waving at me from across the room. Sitting next to her was a man I had never met before. Lisa, come meet Adam, Emma said with a wide smile. He's a really kind guy, and I think you two will get along great. Adam greeted me with a warm, gentle smile. As the night progressed, my nerves began to settle. During dinner, we talked about our work, hobbies, and families. Eventually, I shared my story about Amy. Before I realized it, I was crying. I'm so sorry for bringing this up, I said, embarrassed. It's okay, Adam replied, his voice soft and comforting. Losing someone important is really hard. His warmth and understanding were like a balm to my soul. In that moment, I felt a weight lift off my heart. Adam listened quietly, his steady presence giving me a sense of comfort I hadn't realized I needed. After that night, Adam and I stayed in touch. We began meeting up regularly, grabbing meals, talking during breaks in our schedules, and simply enjoying each other's company. Spending time with Adam gradually filled the void in my heart. One evening, as we sat together at a quiet cafe, I found myself saying, Adam, I feel so at peace when I'm with you. I want to be with you forever. Adam looked a little surprised, but then smiled gently. I feel the same way, Lisa. You make my heart feel at ease. I want us to keep sharing these calm, peaceful days together. Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy. Being with Adam helped me rediscover my smile and my hope for the future. I felt certain that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, I could overcome them with Adam by my side. From that moment on, our days together felt like a dream. Each moment spent with Adam became a treasure. A few years later, we decided to get married. When the day finally came to meet Adam's parents, I was nervous. As we approached their front door, my hands trembled, but Adam gently squeezed my hand. It's okay, Lisa, he said reassuringly. My family is really nice. At the entrance, Adam's parents, Ryan and Sarah, greeted us warmly. Nice to meet you. I'm Lisa, I said, trying to sound confident. Thank you for having me today. Hello, welcome, please come in. We've been looking forward to meeting you, Sarah replied with a smile. Make yourself at home. The atmosphere was friendly and inviting as they guided us into the living room. Sitting there was Adam's older sister, Melissa. Melissa greeted me with a dazzling smile. She was strikingly beautiful, with long, shiny black hair that gleamed in the sunlight and big, expressive eyes. Her cheerful personality instantly lit up the room. Hi, I'm Melissa, Adam's sister. Thank you for coming today, she said warmly. It's an honor to be here, I replied with a smile. At first, Melissa's friendliness put me at ease. We chatted easily about how Adam and I met, and the conversation flowed naturally. So, how did you and Adam meet? She asked. We met through mutual friends, I explained. From the first time I met him, I was drawn to his kind nature. Oh, that's lovely to hear. Adam has always been such a kind soul. Ever since he was a child, he's still that way, so gentle and caring, Melissa said with a smile. Listening to stories about Adam's childhood made me happy. It was clear he had grown up surrounded by love and warmth. The evening felt perfect, until Adam stepped out of the room. I'll be right back, he said, leaving to use the restroom. The moment he was gone, Melissa's expression changed. Her eyes turned cold, and her friendly smile disappeared. Why would he be with someone like you? She sneered. You're just a maid, after all. I froze, unsure of how to respond. You don't belong in this family, she continued, her words cutting like knives. Anyone can do housework. You're just a laborer, nothing more. Her gaze swept over my outfit, and she scoffed. And that outfit? It looks like something out of the 80s. How embarrassing to stand next to Adam looking like that. Tears stung my eyes, but I couldn't find the words to defend myself. This is exactly why you'll never be more than just a maid, she said cruelly. Then, without warning, she grabbed a glass of water and threw it at me. The cold water splashed across my face and clothes, soaking me instantly. I gasped, the shock leaving me frozen in place. Oh no, the floor is wet now, she said mockingly. Why don't you go clean it up? After all, that's your job, isn't it? Her mocking laughter echoed through the room. Adam's parents sat silently, their awkward attempts at diffusing the situation amounting to a week. Now, let's not make a fuss. When Adam returned, he immediately noticed the wet floor. What happened here? He asked, concerned. I forced a smile, trying to hide my tears. Oh, it's nothing, I just had a little accident, I said, excusing myself to the kitchen to calm down. As I wiped my face, Adam appeared behind me. Lisa, are you okay? He asked softly. Lisa, what happened? Adam's voice was filled with concern as he stepped into the kitchen and saw my wet clothes. He grabbed a towel and gently began to dry my hair. Tears welled up in my eyes as I hesitated before answering. It was Melissa. She threw water on me and said, I'm just a maid. She told me to clean up the mess. Adam's expression darkened immediately. Without hesitation, he strode back into the living room, his voice sharp and filled with anger. Melissa, what did you do? Why would you treat Lisa like that? Melissa crossed her arms, feigning innocence. What? I was just asking her to do her job. Isn't she a housekeeper? Adam's parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but didn't say a word. They avoided his gaze, their silence a tacit acceptance of Melissa's behavior. Melissa, that's enough. Adam's voice rose, his frustration evident. Lisa is not just a maid, she's my partner, and you owe her an apology. Melissa rolled her eyes, her tone dismissive. Oh, come on, Adam, you're overreacting. Lisa needs to get used to our family dynamics. I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. I couldn't understand why Adam's parents didn't step in to stop Melissa. That's when I realized Melissa had always been coddled. She was the special child, born prematurely, often sick as a child, and never held accountable for her actions. Their overprotectiveness had turned her into someone who believed she could do no wrong. The door suddenly opened, and a man's footsteps echoed in the hallway. A tall, well-dressed man entered the living room. Sorry I'm late, he said, his deep voice carrying through the tension. I just got back from my trip. Melissa's face lit up, her demeanor changing instantly. Ken, you're home. The man, who I quickly realized was Melissa's husband, smiled warmly. Hi, everyone, I'm Ken. Then his gaze shifted to me, and his smile faded into one of recognition. Wait, are you Lisa? I nodded, confused. Yes, I'm Lisa. Nice to meet you. Ken's face brightened. I can't believe it. My parents used to talk about you all the time. You helped my mom so much after my dad passed. She always said you were like family to her. Tears sprang to my eyes at his kind words. I'm glad I could be there for her. Ken turned to Melissa, his expression now serious. Melissa, what's going on? Why is Lisa soaking wet? Melissa's face went pale. She stammered. I didn't mean to. Ken's gaze hardened. You didn't mean to? Melissa, this is unacceptable. Lisa was a blessing to my family. She deserves respect, not whatever this is. I'm sorry, Melissa muttered, her voice shaky. That's not good enough. Ken snapped. You need to take responsibility for your actions. This behavior isn't okay. Melissa burst into tears. I don't know why I acted that way, she admitted. I felt jealous. Lisa's worked so hard for everything she has, and I've always been taken care of. I felt useless and small compared to her, and I lashed out. I'm sorry, Lisa. Her confession left the room in stunned silence. For the first time, Melissa's vulnerability shone through her polished exterior. Melissa, I said softly, thank you for apologizing. I hope this is the start of something better for you. Ken let out a sigh. Melissa, none of that excuses what you did, but I'm glad you're starting to see things clearly. You need to make real changes. Melissa nodded, wiping her tears. I will, I promise. The atmosphere was heavy as Adam gently took my hand. Let's go, Lisa, we've had enough for today. As we left, Adam squeezed my hand tightly. I'm so sorry, Lisa, I never thought Melissa would act like that. It's okay, Adam, she has her own struggles to deal with. I just hope she grows from this. The drive home was quiet but comforting. We knew we would face any challenges together, no matter what. In the months that followed, Melissa's life took an unexpected turn. Her marriage to Ken unraveled as trust between them broke completely. They eventually decided to separate. Without Ken or her parents' constant support, Melissa faced the harsh reality of living on her own for the first time. She struggled but slowly began to grow. She got a job, learned to manage her finances, and discovered the strength she never knew she had. One day, months later, I ran into Melissa at a coffee shop. She looked different, still confident but with a newfound humility. "Lisa," she said softly, "it's been a while." "It has. How are you?" She hesitated. "I'm doing better. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, and I want to say I'm truly sorry. I was wrong to treat you that way." Her sincerity surprised me. "I can see you're working on yourself, Melissa. That's what matters." Melissa smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Thank you." As for Ken, he moved on, focusing on his career and personal growth. Meanwhile, Adam and I continued building our life together. Despite everything, our bond only grew stronger. "I'm proud of you, Lisa," Adam said one evening. "Why?" "Because you stayed true to yourself. You're the strongest person I know." His words filled my heart with warmth. No matter what challenges came our way, I knew we could face them together, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. "You don't have a room here, so you can sleep in the lobby like a stray dog." With a loud thud, my husband's suitcase was dropped at my feet. The cold spring wind bit into my skin, but it couldn't match the sting of rejection. Just a week ago, when Mark had suggested this family trip, my heart had soared with hope. I thought it might finally be the moment he'd begin to accept me as part of the family. I poured all my love into preparing for the trip, eager to be acknowledged. But now, standing alone in the hotel lobby, I understood everything too well. A sharp shove from behind jolted me, slamming my shoulder into a cold marble column. "Oh, Anna, you were just standing there in the way," my sister-in-law, Heather, remarked with a cruel smile, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "You should curl up in the corner like a stray." Clutching my suitcase, I watched as Mark carefully carried Heather's bags upstairs, his expression one of casual disinterest as he avoided my gaze. "Move to the far corner of the lobby. Your presence brings down our family's dignity," he said coldly, walking off with his sister, shoulder to shoulder, as they made their way to the third floor. Behind me, my mother-in-law's laughter cut through the lobby like a jagged blade. "Better than being outside in the cold, isn't it? Compared to being homeless, the lobby's a luxury," she sneered. They had booked 3 rooms, deliberately excluding me. Again. For years, I had swallowed their cruelty, desperately trying to preserve the family bond one craved. Losing my father as a child had left me yearning for new ties, for a sense of belonging. I endured everything, convincing myself that if I tried harder, if I were a better wife, they might finally value me. But tonight, standing under the chandelier's harsh light, the ache in my shoulder was nothing compared to the turmoil churning inside me. My fingers gripped my phone tightly as I felt something deep within me break apart. With trembling resolve, I took a deep breath and began to dial. "My name is Anna James. I'm 35 years old and a full-time housewife. I married Mark 3 years ago, thrilled at the idea of gaining a new family. Having grown up with just my mother after my father passed, I treasured the concept of family above all else. Before we married, I had built up $5 million in assets through careful stock investments. I never believed financial matters needed to be shared between spouses, but 1 year into our marriage, Mark came home late one night, reeking of alcohol, with tears in his eyes. He confessed to being buried in gambling debt. He begged for my help, saying he couldn't handle it on his salary alone. Moved by his plea, I decided to trust him. The very next day, I told him about my savings. That decision changed everything. Mark's demeanor shifted overnight. He began boasting to his family about my financial success as though it were his own achievement. I hoped this shared confidence might bring us closer, but instead, it became the foundation of his growing entitlement. "Anna, I'm a bit short this month," he'd say, month after month, his paycheck spent on luxuries for himself. If I hesitated, he'd guilt me. "Oh, I get it. A poor guy like me doesn't deserve nice things." I'd sigh, open my wallet, and remind myself that marriage was about partnership, but his requests only grew bolder. Mark spent the money carelessly, expensive golf gear, lavish dinners, designer clothes, while brushing off my concerns with smug jokes. "I have such a generous wife. Aren't I lucky?" Heather and my mother-in-law took advantage of my generosity too, treating my savings like a shared family resource. Heather's thinly veiled sarcasm grated on me. "Mark is so lucky to have such a wealthy wife." She resented my financial independence. and her bitterness often spilled out in cutting remarks. Embroidery? Isn't that such a grandma hobby? She mocked when she saw the cherry blossom piece I had embroidered with my late mother. The craft was a cherished connection to my mom, but her words stung nonetheless. Over time, their relentless scorn and reliance on me drained me. I supported Heather's rent and living expenses, covered for Mark's irresponsibility, and endured their barbs, hoping that one day, they might see my value. But now, as I stood in that hotel lobby, the weight of their cruelty finally broke something inside me. Under the cold, indifferent gaze of my husband and his family, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. It was time to reclaim my life. I had listened to Heather's complaints and supported Gemma financially, all with the hope of strengthening our family bonds. At first, Mark respected my success, Gemma was considerate, and Heather treated me like a sister. But over time, everything shifted. Mark's demands grew, Gemma's dependency deepened, and Heather's bitterness sharpened. Still, I held on, telling myself they would eventually understand and accept me. "Thank you, Anna. I'll make sure to pay this month's rent by tomorrow," Gemma would say every month, her words a hollow promise. Her account was never touched, so I'd deposit $1,200 directly to her landlord to keep her from losing her home. "Mom, are you sure you've handled the rent?" Mark would ask her occasionally. "Oh, I'm managing just fine," she'd reply with a smile, pretending she was independent. It hollowed me out, knowing she relied on me while pretending otherwise. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to tell Mark the truth. Each month, as Mark grew more oblivious to my sacrifices, I began seeing through his dependence, his mother's cunning, and Heather's malice. Embroidery became my refuge, my escape into a peaceful world where I felt close to my late mother. Each stitch was a quiet conversation with her spirit. But even this sacred part of my life wasn't safe from intrusion. "Anna, why don't we have tea together? Let's spend time as a family," Gemma would suggest. If I declined, her friendly facade would vanish. "How dare you act this way? Aren't we family?" Heather would join in with her sharp tongue. "Isn't family important to you, Anna?" Even Mark took their side. "Why can't you just get along with my mom and sister?" he'd say dismissively. Slowly, the joy embroidery once brought me faded. Each prick of the needle began to feel like a stab of guilt and judgment. My home, which should have been my sanctuary, had become suffocating, yet I couldn't let go of the one thing that connected me to my mother. "Anna, I want to get new golf clubs," Mark said one day, his tone insistent as always. When I declined, he leaned into his well-worn tactic of guilt. "You know where I come from, don't I deserve nice things for once?" Then there was Gemma's predictable monthly plea. I could really use help with rent again. I no longer hesitated. I silently transferred the payment to her landlord. But when I saw Gemma proudly showing off a new designer handbag, the truth became painfully clear. "Mom's got the good stuff," Mark said, grinning. It struck me then, my sacrifices weren't appreciated, they were wasted. And still, Mark's sense of entitlement knew no bounds. "Anna, you should treat me too," he joked. I began questioning why I continued to enable this behavior, trapped by a false sense of duty. Then, one day, Mark surprised me. "Hey, Anna, let's do something special for your birthday this year, just the two of us. How about a trip?" I looked up, startled. In 3 years of marriage, we had never celebrated my birthday together. He always claimed he couldn't afford it, telling me to treat myself with my own money. This time, he seemed genuinely enthusiastic. "I'll plan everything. It's your birthday, after all," he said, scrolling through hotels and sightseeing spots. When he showed me a picture of a luxury hotel with grand chandeliers and an elegant lobby, my heart lifted, just a little. As the trip date approached, Mark grew restless, glued to his phone, texting and occasionally smiling to himself. "Is everything okay, Mark?" I asked. "Oh, yeah, nothing, just stuff," he replied vaguely. 3 days before the trip, he came home early, his tone oddly serious. "There's something I wanted to talk about." My heart sank slightly. "So, my mom found a restaurant nearby she really wants to try. I thought it'd be nice to invite her along," he said, almost casually. "Why?" I whispered, feeling an uneasy weight settle in my chest. "Come on, Anna, she'd love it. It'll be family time, right?" Family time. In Mark's world, family always meant his mother, his sister, and maybe me. "Oh, and my sister will be coming too," he added, hesitating as though he knew how wrong it sounded. His explanation felt rehearsed. My birthday trip had somehow morphed into a family affair. My sister's husband and she had a big argument, so she could use the break. "You know," he added, his tone sympathetic. "This was supposed to be my birthday," I said softly, my voice trembling. "What's the problem?" "It's just family." His voice sharpened, shifting blame onto me. "So what, Anna? Are you really that against having them with us?" I swallowed my response. Somehow, his challenge felt like another game he'd already won. On the morning of the trip, Gemma and Heather stood at the station, waiting as though they'd been part of the plan all along. "Anna, we're all set to go, right?" Heather's voice was laced with sweet mockery. "Isn't this perfect? A family trip on your birthday," she added, her sarcasm dripping with satisfaction. I stood silently on the platform, my last flicker of hope extinguished. 3 years of marriage, so many sacrifices, and for what? A hollow sense of belonging to a family that never truly wanted me. I closed my eyes, feeling a faint breeze touch my cheek. "Oh Mark, I'd love one of those nice lunches," his mother said, her voice piercing and intentionally loud. She looped her arm through his, looking right past me as if I were invisible. "Sure, Mom. Anna, can you pay for it?" Mark held out his hand without so much as a glance in my direction, his attention focused entirely on his mother and sister. Resigned, I handed over my wallet, feeling the familiar weight of his disregard. "I'll have the shrimp stir-fry, make it just like Mark's order, it's what he loves after all," his mother said with a smug glance in my direction. "Same for me, nothing like family all enjoying the same thing, huh?" Gemma chimed in. The three of them exchanged smiles, leaving me an outsider on what was supposed to be my special day. On the train, Mark sat between his mother and sister while I was relegated to a seat across the aisle. "So Mark, last night was awful. My husband, well, you know how he is," Gemma began, her dramatic complaints filling the train car and drawing glances from nearby passengers. I sat quietly, weighed down by their voices and the pointed reminders of all the things I supposedly didn't understand. "And Anna, without kids or a career, you wouldn't understand what I go through," Gemma added, her tone dripping with condescension. "True, Anna's got it easy, doesn't she?" Heather laughed. Mark chuckled lightly, as if it were all harmless banter. They kept going, their jabs at me interspersed with barbs at each other, while Mark passively played along. By the time we reached the hotel, any illusion of a warm birthday celebration had been thoroughly shattered. In the lobby, I waited quietly as they checked in. "Hello, Mr. James, your reservation includes 2 rooms, the desk clerk informed him. Mark turned to me with a smug smile. "Oh, Anna, I only booked 2 rooms. Mom and I will share one, and my sister has her own." "Where am I supposed to stay?" I asked, incredulous. "There's enough room for you, but hey, the lobby has some comfy couches. Lucky you, right?" Gemma and Heather laughed openly, their satisfaction blatant. "Look on the bright side, Anna, better here than outside in the cold like some stray dog," Heather added, her voice dripping with mockery. Mark grabbed my wallet again, extracting a few bills. "Don't worry, Anna, we'll grab some drinks in your honor," he said as he walked off with his mother and sister, leaving me standing alone in the lobby. As they disappeared, I gazed up at the chandelier overhead, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It was a turning point. I took out my phone and whispered, "What a shame," before feigning a predicament. "Is there anything we can help you with, ma'am?" the front desk staff asked politely. "Actually, yes, I spoke to the owner in advance, and he assured me I'd be well accommodated," I replied with quiet confidence. The staff's demeanor changed instantly. Recognizing the owner's name, they scrambled to assist me. Moments later, I was upgraded to the presidential suite, treated to a private dinner, and pampered like the only guest that mattered. By the time Mark and his family realized where I was already enjoying a gourmet meal in peaceful luxury. Mark's panicked texts went unanswered, his growing frustration adding to my quiet triumph. For once, I savored my birthday without their scrutiny, knowing this marked the beginning of my freedom. The next morning, I left the hotel as quietly as I had arrived, settling the bill on Mark's credit card. It was time to reclaim my life, leaving them to face the consequences of their own pettiness. Later that morning, back at the hotel, Mark and his family were in a frenzy. "This has to be a mistake," Mark exclaimed, pale-faced, as the front desk calmly explained the charges. The realization dawned on him, his card was maxed out. "What kind of woman would do this to her husband? She's shameless," Heather shrieked. The hotel staff, maintaining their professionalism, informed them they'd be allowed to settle the bill later, a courtesy, thanks to my connections. But they had no idea how this would impact their social standing. When I returned home, the house was silent, and for the first time, I felt peaceful. I opened the curtains, letting in the fresh spring sunlight, and took a deep breath of relief. An hour later, the front door slammed open. "Anna, what the hell were you thinking?" Mark's furious voice was accompanied by his mother's shrill anger and Gemma's snide remarks. They berated me, raising their voices as if to humiliate me into submission, but I simply watched them, my expression calm and unreadable. "Why don't we continue this discussion outside?" I suggested coolly. They paused, caught off guard. "After all, you wouldn't want the neighbors to hear what's been going on, would you?" I walked them out and, with quiet resolve, confronted everything they had hidden. "By the way, here's the truth about the support I've given your mother all these years." Mark's face twisted as I revealed how I'd quietly covered his mother's rent for 3 years. "Starting this month, that arrangement is over," I said firmly. His mother's arrogance melted into desperation. "But Anna, please, you can't just stop like this." "I can, and I already have." I informed Gemma that her petty social media posts about me were well documented and shared with her husband, who was already filing for divorce. One by one, they understood the weight of their choices. They had bonded over their disdain for me, but now, unable to face one another, they were truly alone. A few weeks later, Mark came by to collect his belongings. "Can't we start over?" he asked, his voice full of desperation. "You spent years treating me like a monster wife, didn't you? Well, I hope you enjoyed it," I said calmly. "There's no need for me to act like the villain anymore. This is the end." Days later, a package arrived. Inside was one of my cherished embroidery pieces, carefully wrapped, with a note of apology from Mark's niece. It was a small but powerful reminder that kindness and understanding don't come from force, they come from genuine connection. Soon after, I began teaching embroidery classes, pouring myself into the craft my mother had taught me. Each stitch deepened my sense of peace. I had finally built my own circle of support and joy, not through obligation, but through love and authenticity, just as my mother would have wanted.
The leather-bound recipe book sat heavily in my hands, its pages worn from decades of use. Sarah's last gift to me, passed on just days before cancer took her at 35. While our wealthy family lived in mansions and drove luxury cars, Sarah and I had chosen a different path. She became a small-town baker, and I pursued my dream of becoming a chef. "Promise me you'll use these recipes, Emma," she'd whisper from her hospital bed. "They're more valuable than anyone knows." I'm Emma Chen, and until 6 months ago, I was just another struggling chef in San Francisco. After graduating from culinary school, I'd opened a small neighborhood restaurant called Homemade. Nothing fancy, just honest food made with love. Our parents and older siblings, successful business executives and lawyers, saw it as proof of our failure. 2 daughters who play with food while their siblings run companies, Mom would say at family gatherings, her disappointment sharp enough to cut. The day everything changed started like any other. I was in my tiny restaurant kitchen, experimenting with Sarah's recipes. The book was extraordinary, not just for the recipes themselves, but for Sarah's meticulous notes in the margins. Complex flavor combinations, unexpected ingredient pairings, and techniques I'd never seen before. "Hey chef," Marcus, my sous chef, called out. "You need to see this." He pointed to the TV in a corner where a famous food critic was reviewing restaurants. I nearly dropped the bowl I was holding when I saw him describing an extraordinary sauce he tasted in Hong Kong. "This remarkable flavor," he said, "I've only encountered once before, at a small family restaurant in Beijing 20 years ago. The Chen family's imperial sauce. A closely guarded secret that died with the last chef. If anyone could recreate it, they'd have a culinary goldmine." My hands trembled as I opened Sarah's book to the recipe I'd been studying. There, in her careful handwriting, was a recipe titled Great-Grandmother's Imperial Sauce. Below it, Sarah had written, "Found in Great-Grandmother's trunk. The original Chen family recipe from the Imperial Palace." Our great-grandmother had indeed been a cook in Beijing's Forbidden City before the revolution. She fled to America with nothing but her skills and apparently some very valuable recipes. But our status-obsessed family had buried that history, embarrassed by their humble culinary roots. I spent the next week perfecting the sauce. The ingredients were simple, but the technique was incredibly complex. When I finally got it right, the flavor was unlike anything I'd ever tasted, sweet, savory, and utterly unique. The annual Chen family reunion was approaching, held at my older brother Michael's Palo Alto mansion. I decided to bring some of my dishes, including the imperial sauce. Maybe finally, They'd see value in what Sarah and I had chosen to do with our lives. "Emma's here," my sister Victoria announced as I walked in carrying my containers. "Still playing restaurant while the rest of us build real businesses." Michael, our oldest brother and CEO of a successful tech company, barely looked up from his phone. Mom hurried over, her China suit immaculate as always. "Darling, you didn't need to bring food. We have caterers." She eyed my containers with barely concealed disdain. "From La Cirque." I set up my dishes on a corner of the buffet, including the special sauce I'd made. As family members arrived, they naturally gravitated toward the catered food, avoiding my corner as if it might contaminate their designer clothes. Then Uncle James, always the family rebel, tried my sauce. His eyes widened. This is incredible. It reminds me of something I tasted years ago in Beijing." Suddenly, everyone wanted to try it. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Even Victoria forgot her usual disdain, asking for the recipe. "It's just something I've been working on," I said quietly, "from Sarah's old recipe book." Mom froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Sarah's recipes? Where did she get them?" "Great-grandmother's trunk, apparently. There's lots of interesting things in that old book." "That book belongs to the family," Mom said sharply. "Sarah had no right to." "To what?" I interrupted. "To pass down her own grandmother's recipes, to value our real family history instead of the sanitized version you prefer." The room fell silent. I could see the wheels turning in Michael's head as he tasted the sauce again. "You know," he said slowly, "with the right marketing, this could be worth millions. We should discuss acquiring your restaurant, Emma. Bring it into the Chen Group properly." I thought of Sarah, of her passion for authentic cooking, of her belief that food was about love, not profit. "The restaurant's not for sale, Michael, and neither are the recipes." "Don't be stupid," Victoria snapped. "You're a nobody running a tiny restaurant. We could make this huge." "Like you made huge profits from great-grandmother's jade collection?" I asked quietly. Everyone stiffened. Years ago, our parents had sold our great-grandmother's jade pieces for a fortune, pieces she wanted preserved in the family. "That was different," Mom protested. "We needed that money to build our position in society, to give you children opportunities, to erase our real heritage, you mean?" I picked up Sarah's recipe book. "Well, not this time. Sarah protected these recipes for a reason, and I'm going to honor that." As I turned to leave, Michael called out, "You're making a big mistake, Emma. That sauce could be worth millions with our backing." I paused at the door. "It already is worth millions, Michael. You just don't know it yet." What I didn't tell them was that earlier that week, I'd received an interesting visitor at my restaurant, someone who recognized the imperial sauce immediately, someone whose offer would change everything. But I had no idea that my family was already plotting to take what they saw as rightfully theirs, or that Sarah had left me more than just recipes in that old book. The war for our great-grandmother's legacy was about to begin. The storm hit the next morning. I arrived at Homemade to find a crowd outside. Customers, food bloggers, and several TV crews. Overnight, a viral video of the famous food critic discovering my imperial sauce had exploded online. "Chef Chen." A reporter thrust a microphone toward me. "Is it true you've recreated the legendary imperial sauce? How did you discover the recipe?" Before I could answer, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up. Michael stepped out, followed by two men in expensive suits. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smoothly, "I'm Michael Chen, CEO of Chen Group International and Emma's older brother. We're excited to announce that the imperial sauce and all Chen family recipes will soon be launched under a corporate umbrella." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" He gripped my arm, smile never wavering. "Let's discuss this inside, sister dear." In my office, Michael's true colors emerged. The men with him were corporate lawyers, armed with intimidating stacks of documents. "These recipes are Chen family intellectual property," Michael stated flatly. "Mom and Dad have signed affidavits confirming they never gave Sarah permission to take great-grandmother's recipe book. As family head, I'm demanding its immediate return. Sarah found that book in great-grandmother's trunk, which was left to her specifically. A trunk of old clothes," Michael scoffed. "Any valuable contents clearly weren't meant to be included." Besides, his smile turned predatory. "How do you think health inspectors will react when they start receiving anonymous complaints about your kitchen? How long can a small restaurant survive repeated investigations?" You're threatening me. I'm protecting our family legacy. You have until tomorrow to sign these papers transferring all rights to Chen Group. Don't make this difficult, Emma. After they left, I sank into my chair, Sarah's recipe book clutched to my chest. That's when I noticed something odd, a slight bulge in the book's leather backing. Carefully examining it under light, I found a hidden pocket. Inside was an old letter, written in our great-grandmother's elegant hand. My dearest granddaughter Sarah, I see in you what I see in few others, true love for our family's art. Not the money it brings, but the joy it creates. You remind me of my days in the imperial kitchen, before revolution and greed destroy everything. The recipes in this book are more than family secrets. They are our true legacy. The imperial sauce alone saved our family twice, once in Beijing when it bought our escape to America, and again in 1965, when its secret formula secured our future here. But there are those who would use these recipes for profit alone. That is why I entrust them to you, my quiet one who understands their real value. In the garden of our old home in Beijing lies proof of our history, documents that establish our original ownership of these recipes. I have arranged for copies to be kept safe with old friends. Protect our legacy, dear one. Money comes and goes, but true wealth lies in what we create with love. Your loving grandmother, Lin Chen. My hands trembled as I reread the letter. Sarah must have discovered this shortly before her illness. This wasn't just about recipes anymore. It was about our family's true history. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Mr. Wang, my elderly fish supplier, stood in the doorway. I saw the news, he said quietly, and I recognized that sauce. My grandfather was Imperial Kitchen staff too. My heart skipped. Mr. Wang, did your grandfather ever mention the Chen family? He smiled mysteriously. Come with me. There's something you should see. His tiny shop in Chinatown concealed a surprise, a hidden room filled with historical documents and photographs. And there, in a faded photograph from 1940, stood my great-grandmother in the imperial kitchen, proudly holding a sauce bowl. Your great-grandmother wasn't just any cook, Mr. Wang explained. She was the last official keeper of the imperial recipes. When she fled, she took them legally. They were her responsibility to protect. He handed me a stack of weathered documents. My grandfather kept copies of everything. The recipe ownership certificates, the official authorization, all proving your family's rightful claim. I was speechless. These documents weren't just history. They were ammunition. But while I was discovering our true legacy, my family was making their next move. Victoria had convinced our cousin David, a popular food blogger, to write a scathing review of Homemade, questioning the authenticity of our recipes. The war was escalating, and I needed help. That's when I remembered another note in Sarah's recipe book, mentioning someone named Master Chen in Hong Kong. No relation, but perhaps an ally. I had no idea that my search for help would uncover an even bigger secret, one that would shake our family to its core. I'd arrived in Hong Kong as the city was waking up, the morning air thick with humidity and possibility. Master Chen's restaurant was tucked away in an ancient building in Kowloon, its faded sign barely visible among the neon lights. Inside, an elderly man was teaching a young apprentice the precise way to fold dumplings. Without looking up, he said in perfect English, "I've been expecting you, Emma Chen. Sarah told you about me." He smiled, his eyes crinkling. Sarah told me many things, including what might happen after she was gone. He gestured to a private room. Come, your family's story is longer than you know. Over tea served in delicate imperial porcelain, Master Chen revealed the truth. He wasn't just any chef. He was the grandson of the imperial kitchen's headmaster, and he'd been waiting decades for this moment. Your great-grandmother and my grandfather made a pact, he explained, unlocking an ornate wooden chest. They knew the revolution would destroy centuries of culinary heritage, so they divided and protected the most precious recipes. He spread out ancient scrolls and photographs. The imperial sauce you recreated. It's only the beginning. These recipes aren't just about food. They're about power. In the old days, these dishes were served only to emperors. They contain combinations of ingredients that affect mood, energy, even longevity. That's why Michael wants them so badly, I realized. The commercial potential is worth billions, Master Chen nodded. But there's something else you need to see. He played a video on his phone. Sarah's face filled the screen, recorded months before her death. Emma, if you're watching this, you found Master Chen. Her familiar smile, though tired, warmed my heart. There's something you need to know about our family. The truth hit like a thunderbolt. Our great-grandmother hadn't just been a cook. She'd been the illegitimate daughter of a royal concubine, raised in the imperial kitchen to protect her. The recipes were her birthright, passed down through generations of female chefs. That's why I left you the book, Sarah continued. In our family's history, it's always been the women who understood food's true power. Not as a commodity, but as a way to heal, to connect, to love. Master Chen handed me a USB drive. This contains everything: historical proof of your lineage, documentation of the recipe's origins, and evidence of their scientific properties. Sarah prepared it all before she died. Back in San Francisco, I found my restaurant surrounded by protesters. Michael had hired them to carry signs questioning our food's authenticity. Victoria was giving interviews about family recipes stolen by an ungrateful sister. But I wasn't worried. I'd learned more than just history in Hong Kong. The next morning, at the emergency board meeting Michael had called for Chen Group's new authentic imperial cuisine line, I arrived early. The boardroom was packed with executives, lawyers, and one special guest. The Chinese cultural minister himself, invited by Michael to legitimize their claim to the recipes. Michael smiled triumphantly. Emma, so nice of you to join us. We were just discussing the launch of our new product line. Interesting, I replied calmly. And what exactly are you launching? The Chen family's imperial recipes, of course. We have Mom and Dad's sworn statements about their ownership. I connected my laptop to the projector. Let's talk about ownership. For the next hour, I presented the truth. Documents, photographs, scientific analysis of the recipe's unique properties, and finally Sarah's video testimony. The cultural minister leaned forward, increasingly agitated. These recipes, he announced, are protected Chinese cultural heritage. Any attempt to commercialize them without proper authority would be problematic. Michael's face turned ash white. But our patents are invalid, I interrupted, because Sarah and I filed the proper cultural heritage protection documents years ago. These recipes can't be mass-produced or commercialized. They can only be passed down through certified training, exactly as they have been for centuries. Victoria jumped up. You planned this all along. You and Sarah protected our true legacy, I finished. And now I'm offering you all a choice. I laid out my proposal. Homemade would become a culinary training center, preserving traditional techniques and recipes. Any family member willing to learn properly, to honor the traditions and history, would be welcome. But, I added, no shortcuts, no mass production, no selling out our heritage for quick profits. The cultural minister nodded approvingly. The Chinese government would be very interested in supporting such a venture. As a cultural exchange program, perhaps. Michael slumped in his chair, defeated. His dreams of instant billions evaporating. Mom stood up slowly. The recipes, they really came from her? From the royal family? I handed her great-grandmother's photograph. From a woman who valued tradition over status, who believed food should bring people together, not drive them apart. Tears filled her eyes. I never knew, we never let her tell us. 1 year later, Homemade has transformed. We still serve traditional dishes, but we also train new chefs in the ancient techniques. Victoria, surprisingly, was the first to enroll in our program. Turns out she has a natural talent for dim sum. Michael focuses on the business side, but differently now, promoting cultural preservation rather than exploitation. Mom spends hours in the kitchen, finally learning the family stories she once dismissed. Yesterday, a young girl watched me teach the imperial sauce technique, just as great-grandmother once taught it in the palace kitchens. Does everyone get to learn the secret recipes? She asked. I smiled, remembering Sarah's words. The real secret isn't in the recipes. It's an understanding that the most precious things can't be bought or sold. They can only be passed down with love. Master Chen visits often, helping us maintain the old traditions while creating new ones. The cultural minister's endorsement has made us a bridge between culinary worlds. In my office, Sarah's recipe book sits in a special place of honor. But it's no longer just a book of recipes. It's a reminder that our true inheritance isn't measured in money or status. but in the wisdom, love, and traditions we choose to preserve and share. Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't what we gain, but what we protect, and sometimes the most powerful recipes aren't for food at all. They're for healing the bonds that break when we forget who we really are. I never thought I'd end up working at Sterling Corp, one of the biggest tech companies in Seattle. Growing up in a small town in Idaho, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs, corporate life seemed like a distant dream. But here I was, Sarah Collins, 26 years old, sitting at my desk on the 47th floor of Sterling Tower. Well, technically, it was a cubicle, a very small cubicle. Collins, where's the Johnson report? I flinched at the sharp voice of Diana Pierce, my immediate supervisor and personal tormentor for the past year. She stood at my cubicle entrance, designer heels tapping impatiently, perfect blonde hair swept into a severe bun. I sent it 10 minutes ago, Ms. Pierce. I replied, pulling up my sent emails. Should be in your inbox. Diana's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. I don't see it. Send it again. And fix those margins this time. They're atrocious. The margins were exactly as she'd specified in her last 3 memos about proper document formatting. But I knew better than to argue. Right away, Ms. Pierce. As she clicked away, I heard the whispers from nearby cubicles. Everyone knew Diana had it out for me, but no one knew why. Maybe it was my Target clearance rack clothes among their designer suits. Maybe it was my state school degree among their Ivy League credentials. Or maybe some people just needed someone to look down on to feel better about themselves. Don't let her get to you, whispered Maria from the next cubicle. She was one of the few friends I'd made here, a fellow outsider in the corporate jungle. She's just mad because Roberts praised your presentation in the morning meeting. I managed a small smile, but my hands were shaking as I resent the report. One wrong move, one tiny mistake, and Diana would have the excuse she needed to fire me. I couldn't lose this job. Not with Mom's medical bills piling up back home. The next few hours passed in a blur of spreadsheets and passive-aggressive emails from Diana. By 6 p.m., the office was nearly empty, but I was still at my desk, triple-checking a presentation for tomorrow's client meeting. Still here, Collins? No plans for Friday night? Diana's mocking voice made me jump. She stood there with her designer bag, clearly headed out. Just finishing up the Wilson presentation, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She examined her manicure. Don't forget about tomorrow's office party. Attendance is mandatory. Try to wear something appropriate this time. My cheeks burned remembering last month's team lunch where she loudly commented on my discount store fashion sense in front of everyone. After she left, I slumped in my chair, fighting back tears. The office party. Another chance for Diana to remind everyone that I didn't belong in her world. Rough day? The gentle voice startled me. A young woman stood by my cubicle, someone I'd never seen before. She looked about my age, with warm brown eyes and a friendly smile. Her clothes were simple, jeans, a sweater, and comfortable flats, making her stand out among Sterling Corp's usual power suits. I'm Emma, she said, perching casually on the edge of my desk. Just started in marketing today. Sarah Collins, I managed, quickly wiping my eyes. Welcome to Sterling Corp. Thanks, she glanced at my computer screen. The Wilson presentation. I nodded miserably. My boss wants it perfect for Monday's meeting. Ah, Diana Pierce. Emma's eyes twinkled. I heard about her. Quite the reputation. That's one way to put it. I found myself relaxing despite everything. There was something about Emma that made her easy to talk to. Hey, want to grab coffee? I know a great little place around the corner. You look like you could use a break. I hesitated, looking at my screen. The presentation will still be there in an hour. Emma said gently. Come on. My treat. Something in her voice made me nod. Grabbing my coat, I followed her to a cozy cafe I'd walked past 100 times but never entered. Over steaming lattes, Emma proved to be an excellent listener. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything about growing up poor, about Mom's illness, about landing this job and Diana's constant harassment. Why don't you report her? Emma asked, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. I laughed bitterly. To who? She's untouchable. Her father plays golf with half the board members. Besides, I need this job. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. No one's untouchable, Sarah. Trust me on that. There was something in her tone that made me look at her more closely, but she quickly changed the subject, asking about my work in the marketing department. By the time we left the cafe, I felt lighter somehow. Emma had that effect, making problems seem more manageable just by listening. "See you at the party tomorrow?" she asked as we parted ways. I grimaced. Unfortunately, have to find something appropriate to wear first. Emma's smile turned mysterious. "Don't worry about that. Just be yourself. Sometimes things have a way of working out." I should have known then that Emma wasn't just another new employee. Should have noticed how the security guard straightened up when she passed, how she navigated the building with the confidence of someone who'd known it for years. But I didn't. I was too preoccupied with surviving another day in Diana's world. The next evening, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, trying to make my only nice dress look more expensive than it was. The office party was being held at the Vista, one of Seattle's most exclusive rooftop restaurants. Another chance for Diana to remind me I didn't belong. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Don't be nervous. Tonight's going to be interesting." I didn't know then just how right she was. Didn't know that in a few hours everything would change. That Diana Pierce was about to learn a very expensive lesson about judging people. The Vista's rooftop restaurant took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of Seattle's skyline. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and champagne flowed freely among the well-dressed crowd. I felt painfully out of place in my simple black dress from last year's clearance rack. Well, Diana's voice dripped with disdain. "You actually showed up, Collins, and in the same dress you wore to last year's holiday party. How economical of you." She stood with a group of senior managers, all of them smirking at her comment. Her own dress probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. "Thank you for noticing, Ms. Pierce," I managed, gripping my water glass tightly. I couldn't afford to lose my temper. "Not here, not now." "You know," Diana continued loudly, clearly enjoying her audience, "some people just don't understand corporate culture. They think they can walk in from their little small-town lives and fit in at a company like Sterling Corp." She looked me up and down meaningfully. "But class and sophistication can't be bought at Target, can they?" Laughter rippled through her group. My face burned with humiliation. "I should go check on the Wilson presentation," I mumbled, turning to leave. "Oh yes, run back to your little cubicle," Diana called after me. "That's where poor people like you belong. Not here among actual professionals." I was nearly at the elevator when a familiar voice stopped me. "Leaving so soon?" Emma stood there, but not in the casual clothes I'd seen her in yesterday. Tonight she wore a stunning red designer dress that made my simple black one look like a dish rag. Yet somehow, her warm smile was exactly the same. "I don't belong here," I whispered, fighting back tears. Actually, Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief. "You belong here more than most. Come with me." Before I could protest, she linked her arm through mine and led me back into the party. Diana was still holding court near the windows, regaling her audience with what I assumed were more jokes at my expense. "Miss Pierce," Emma called out clearly. The room suddenly went quiet. Diana turned, her practiced smile freezing when she saw Emma. "I'm sorry you are." "Emma Sterling," my new friend replied calmly, "though you probably know me better as Robert Sterling's daughter. You know, your CEO." The champagne glass in Diana's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. They were all too busy staring at Emma in shock. I was staring too. Emma Sterling, the Emma Sterling. Heir to Sterling Corp and notorious for working incognito in different departments to learn the business from the ground up. Miss Sterling. Diana's face had gone from smug to sickly pale in seconds. "I had no idea you were. We weren't expecting." Clearly, Emma's voice was arctic. "I spent the past month observing various departments, Ms. Pierce, getting to know our employees, their strengths, their challenges." Her eyes hardened. "Their bullies." The silence in the room was deafening. "I've seen how you treat people you consider beneath you," Emma continued, "particularly Sarah Collins, one of our most promising young marketing analysts. Did you know her campaign proposals have increased our social media engagement by 47% this quarter? Or were you too busy criticizing her clothes to notice her work?" Diana's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was just maintaining professional standards. Professional standards. Emma's laugh was sharp. Let's talk about professional standards, Miss Pierce. Like using company resources to plan your personal vacation, or taking credit for your subordinate's work, or the fact that your father's golf buddies on the board can't protect you anymore because they all retired last month. The color drained from Diana's face completely. Your services at Sterling Corp are no longer required, Emma stated flatly. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. Your replacement starts Monday. She paused, then added with a hint of satisfaction. I believe you know her. Sarah Collins? My head spun. What was happening? You can't do this. Diana sputtered. My father. Your father already agreed to your termination when I showed him the evidence. Emma cut in. He was quite embarrassed, actually. Now I believe security is waiting. 2 security guards materialized as if by magic. Diana looked around wildly, but her former sycophants were suddenly very interested in their shoes. As she was led away, Emma turned to address the stunned crowd. Sterling Corp's success was built on innovation, integrity, and treating people with respect. Anyone who can't embrace those values should follow Ms. Pierce's example and leave. Now, the room quickly emptied, leaving just Emma and me. You planned this? I managed finally. Emma grinned. I've been working undercover in different departments for 6 months, evaluating our corporate culture. Diana Pierce wasn't the only toxic manager we found, but she was by far the worst. She squeezed my hand. Your promotion is real, by the way. Your work caught my eye weeks ago, before I even met you. But why? I gestured helplessly at everything. Because talent and hard work matter more than designer labels, Emma said firmly. Because I grew up watching people like Diana Pierce make life miserable for people like you. Because Sterling Corp needs leaders who lift others up, not tear them down. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, Emma laughed. Wait until you see your new office, and your new salary. She linked her arm through mine again. Come on, let's get out of here. That little cafe is still open, and I think this calls for celebration lattes. As we left the vista, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Diana had been right about one thing. I didn't belong in her world of petty bullying and social climbing. I belonged in something better. 3 months later, my marketing team's latest campaign won an industry award. I accepted it wearing a Target dress, standing next to Emma in her designer gown. We both smiled for the cameras, ignoring the whispers about my inappropriate attire. Because we knew something the whispers didn't. Success isn't about where your clothes come from or who your parents know. It's about what you bring to the table. As for Diana, last I heard, she was working at a small firm in Tacoma. Apparently, her father's golf connections weren't as useful as they used to be. Emma and I still meet at that little cafe every week, planning Sterling Corp's future over lattes. She's still the same person who sat on my desk that Friday evening, kind, genuine, and completely unimpressed by designer labels. And me? I still shop at Target, but now I do it from my corner office on the 50th floor. Sometimes life has a way of putting bullies in their place. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say enough. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you think is just a friendly new colleague turns out to be exactly who you needed in your corner all along. Life has a funny way of revealing the truth about people, especially when there's money involved. I never thought my own sister would try to legally declare me dead. But I guess $12 million can make people do crazy things. I'm Emma Chen, 29 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew everything about my life. I was raised by my mom, Lisa Chen, after my father supposedly abandoned us before I was born. My half-sister, Rachel, came along when Mom remarried Jack Wilson when I was 4. We grew up in a modest home in Boston, and while we weren't poor, Mom always emphasized the importance of education and hard work. What none of us knew was that my biological father, David Thompson, had been searching for us for years. Mom had disappeared while pregnant with me, thinking she was protecting us from what she believed was his controlling family. The truth, as I would later learn, was far more complicated. But let me start with the day everything changed. I'd spent the last 5 years building my photography career, traveling to remote corners of the world capturing images for National Geographic and other major publications. My latest assignment took me to the Himalayan mountains, documenting traditional villages that were adapting to climate change. It was challenging work, No reliable phone service, spotty internet at best, and days of hiking between locations. Rachel had always been jealous of my glamorous career, though she never understood the countless nights I spent sleeping on frozen ground or the years of unpaid internships it took to get here. She chose a different path, working as a real estate agent and marrying Tom, a struggling day trader with expensive tastes. The last time I spoke to Mom was 3 months into my assignment. She sounded strange on our satellite phone call, emotional but trying to hide it. "Emma, honey," she said, her voice crackling through the poor connection. "There's something important I need to tell you when you get back. Something about your father." "Mom, you're breaking up," I replied, struggling to hear her through the static. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, just come home soon. I love you." Those were her last words to me. 2 weeks later, while I was in a remote village with no communication, Mom had a sudden heart attack. By the time I made it back to civilization and checked my messages, she had been gone for 10 days. I immediately began the long journey home, but travel from remote Nepal isn't simple. Delayed flights, missed connections, and monsoon weather stretched my return into a 3-week ordeal. What I didn't know was that Rachel had already set her plan in motion. You see, 6 months before Mom's death, she'd received a letter from a prestigious law firm. My biological father, David Thompson, had finally tracked us down. He was a federal judge now and had never stopped looking for us. More importantly, he'd recently been diagnosed with terminal cancer and wanted to make things right. He'd set up a trust fund for me, $12 million, plus properties in 3 states. Mom had been processing this information, trying to figure out how to tell me the truth about my father when she passed away. Rachel found the letter while going through Mom's papers. And that's when she saw her opportunity. While I was desperately trying to get home, Rachel was convincing everyone that I had died in a hiking accident in Nepal. She used her real estate connections to create false documentation, took advantage of the language barrier and poor communication with local authorities, and even held a memorial service with an empty casket. My poor sister, she'd sobbed to the mourners. At least she died doing what she loved. By the time I finally made it back to Boston, Rachel had already filed papers to claim the inheritance as my only surviving sibling. She even moved into one of the properties left in the trust. I'll never forget the moment I walked into my childhood home. Rachel was sitting in the living room with Tom, surrounded by papers from the law firm, when I opened the door with my key. The color drained from her face as if she'd seen a ghost, which in her mind she had. Emma," she stammered, dropping her coffee mug. It shattered on the hardwood floor Mom had been so proud of. You're supposed to be dead." I finished for her, setting down my weathered backpack. "Funny thing about that, I'm very much alive." Tom bolted from the room, nearly tripping over his own feet. Rachel's shock quickly turned to calculation. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to spin this. "Emma, thank God." She jumped up, arms open for a hug I didn't return. "We thought there was a report from Naples. We were devastated. I've been trying to handle all the legal matters for you to protect your interests." "Really?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the emails I discovered on Mom's computer. "Is that why you told the law firm I died in a climbing accident? Why you've been trying to claim my inheritance?" I can explain," she sputtered. "It's not what you think." But I wasn't interested in her explanations. I'd spent the flight home doing my research, making calls, and uncovering every detail of her scheme. What I discovered wasn't just fraud, it was a calculated plan that had started even before Mom's death. What Rachel didn't know, what none of us had known, was that I wasn't the only one who had inherited my biological father's methodical nature and attention to detail, and I was about to show my dear sister exactly what that meant. "Pack your bags," I said calmly, pulling out a formal-looking document. "You have 24 hours to vacate this property, and Rachel, don't bother trying to run. The FBI is already investigating the false death reports you filed." She lunged for the document in my hand, but I stepped back. "You can't prove anything. It was a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect our family's interests." I smiled, thinking of the meeting I had scheduled for the next morning. "Actually, I can prove everything. And you're about to learn exactly who you've been trying to steal from." What happened next would shake our family to its core, expose decades of secrets, and lead to a courtroom confrontation that nobody saw coming. But that's where the real story begins. The next morning, I walked into the federal courthouse in downtown Boston, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Rachel had spent the night calling everyone she knew, trying to find a lawyer willing to defend her misunderstanding. She'd even tried convincing our stepdad, Jack, to reason with me. "Emma, please," he'd begged over the phone. "Rachel made a mistake, but she's still your sister." "No, Jack," I'd replied firmly. "A mistake is accidentally damaging someone's car." She tried to legally declare me dead. What Rachel didn't know was that I'd already been in contact with Judge David Thompson's office. When I couldn't reach Mom during my trip, I finally opened that email I'd been avoiding. The one from the law firm explaining my father's search for me. After confirming Mom's death, I'd reached out to them. The security guard at the courthouse entrance did a double take when he checked my ID. "Miss Chen, or should I say Miss Thompson?" he said with a knowing smile. "You look just like your father." I was directed to a private chamber where a tall, distinguished-looking man in his early 60s stood looking out the window. He turned as I entered, and I felt my breath catch. It was like looking at an older, male version of myself. We had the same sharp green eyes, the same way of tilting our heads when studying something. "Emma," he breathed, taking a step forward but stopping himself. "I've waited so long." Tears filled my eyes. "Why didn't you find us sooner?" "I tried. God, I tried." He sank into a leather chair, gesturing for me to sit. "Your mother. Lisa was trying to protect you. My family back then. My father, he was a controlling man. Lisa thought he'd try to take you away from her, raise you as the proper Thompson here. She didn't know he was dying, that things were about to change." For the next hour, he filled in the gaps of my history. How he'd hired private investigators, how he'd finally reformed his family's old money attitudes as he rose through the legal ranks, how finding that first photo of me in National Geographic had given him hope. "When I got sick," he continued, "I knew I had to move faster. The inheritance was never about the money. It was about giving you the security I should have provided all along." A knock at the door interrupted us. "Judge Thompson." "They're ready." He squeezed my hand. "Ready to face your sister?" I nodded. "More than ready." The courtroom was packed. News of a federal judge's long-lost daughter and attempted inheritance fraud had spread quickly. Rachel sat at the defendant's table, wearing her most modest black dress, clearly going for a grieving sister image. Her expensive lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Then my father took the bench and everything changed. Rachel's face went from practiced sorrow to shock as she looked between Judge Thompson and me, finally seeing the obvious resemblance. Her lawyer's whispers became more frantic. "This emergency hearing will address the fraudulent death declaration of Emma Chen, also known as Emma Thompson, and the attempted theft of her inheritance through false documentation," my father began, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. Rachel's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we request you recuse yourself due to obvious conflict of interest." "Already arranged," my father replied calmly. "Judge Martinez will be here momentarily to proceed. I simply wanted to be present for this opening statement." He turned to Rachel, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Ms. Wilson, when you attempted to have your sister declared dead, did you ever wonder why a federal judge would leave such a substantial inheritance to a photographer he never met?" Rachel's carefully constructed facade cracked. I didn't." "No, you didn't think," he continued. "You saw an opportunity and took it, never questioning why I would track down your sister after 29 years. Never wondering why we have the same eyes, the same expressions. Never considering that I tried to steal from her. You were attempting to defraud a federal judge's daughter." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Rachel's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Martinez arrived and the real proceedings began. The evidence was overwhelming. Rachel had forged documents, bribed officials in Nepal, and even created fake death certificates. She'd planned it all while Mom was still alive, waiting for an opportunity. But the biggest shock came when Tom, Rachel's husband, took the stand. "She started planning it months ago," he testified, avoiding Rachel's murderous glare. "When she found out about Emma's real father being Judge Thompson, she became obsessed. Said it wasn't fair that Emma got everything just for being born to the right father. She even suggested we should adopt Emma's future share of Mom's estate since dead people can't inherit. I watched my sister crumble as her husband betrayed her, as her schemes were exposed one by one. The woman who'd once been my childhood playmate, who borrowed my clothes and shared my secrets, was revealed as a stranger. The judge's verdict was swift and severe. Rachel was facing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and filing false reports. She'd have to repay all the money she'd spent from the properties she'd illegally occupied. Her real estate license was suspended pending further investigation. But it was our stepfather's words in the hallway afterward that truly ended things. "Your mother," Jack said, tears in his eyes. "She wanted to tell you about Judge Thompson for years. She was so proud of you, Emma." "Rachel, she knew that. She knew and still chose to do this. I can't defend her anymore." Rachel was led away in handcuffs, sobbing not from remorse, but from being caught. As she passed me, she hissed, "You think you're better than me now? With your fancy real father and millions?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt only pity. "I was never competing with you, Rachel. You were the only one keeping score." The aftermath changed everything. Judge Thompson, Dad, and I began the slow process of building a relationship. He retired from the bench to focus on his health and making up for lost time. The treatments were working better than expected, giving us precious months to connect. I kept my photography career but established a foundation in Mom's name, providing scholarships for young photographers from underprivileged backgrounds. One of Dad's properties became a gallery showcasing their work. Rachel was sentenced to 5 years in prison for her crimes. Tom filed for divorce and cooperated with authorities in exchange for leniency. Jack visits her sometimes, but our family will never be the same. Last week, I found an old photo album in Mom's things. There was a picture of Rachel and me as kids, grinning with ice cream-covered faces, genuinely happy in each other's company. I thought about showing it to her during visiting hours, but decided against it. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. But other things, like my newfound relationship with my father, prove that it's never too late for a new beginning. Dad and I often sit in his study, sharing stories and making up for lost time. "You know," he said recently, "your mother was right to be worried about my family back then. But she was wrong about one thing. Running away didn't prevent you from becoming a Thompson. You've got our spirit, our sense of justice." I smiled, thinking of the long road that led us here. Maybe sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. And who am I? I'm Emma Chin Thompson, daughter of a mother who protected me and a father who never stopped searching. I'm a photographer who captures truth through my lens and a woman who learned that real family isn't about blood or money, it's about choice. As for Rachel, I heard she's writing a memoir in prison about family betrayal. I wish her well, but some stories don't need to be rewritten. Sometimes the truth is enough.